I'll bring the Assembly Finance Committee meeting for May 22nd to order. Ms. Wendell, will you note the roll?
Thank you, Chair Wall. We have all Assembly members present in chambers and Assembly members Smith, Hughes Scandies, and Wahlal Gadak on Zoom.
Thank you. That brings us to approval of minutes. You have in your supplemental materials the May 8th, 2024 AFC minutes. Are there any objections or edits to those minutes? Seeing none, those are so approved, which brings us to agenda topics. We're going to start the night finishing off the pending list for final action. We're going to go through this the same way that we did the first half of the pending list. I will ask for the sponsor or sponsors to move their item, and then we will take action as necessary. All right, I'm gonna get us started with AEYC and Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you, Chair Wall. I move that we approve $500,000 to support for AEYC over 3 years with an MOA, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objections to the motion? Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I object to the motion, and I can explain why and maybe propose what might be an amendment, but not at this moment.
Maybe speak to why, and then
I can speak to why.
yes.
I believe in their explanation of why they needed 500,000, they were doing some contingency planning for sure, and thinking that the state might not come through. However, they also said that their budget is needing 133,000 a year. And they just want to have some cushion in case the state doesn't come through. But in the past, they've been able to come to the Assembly when they needed additional funding, and we have followed through with that. So we'll make an amendment after more discussion to bring that down to 399 or 400,000. Thank you.
I saw some other hands. Do you all still want to speak, or should I ask Madam Hale to? Okay, I see hands. Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Hale. I was going to try and feel the room out to try and come up with a number that would be more appropriate, and I agreed with all the points that Ms. Hale made, and I would support an amendment that around that amount. Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Smith and then Ms. Hughes Scandies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just, and I'm wondering if the sponsor could do it. I've looked at the documents and I'm just trying to go down memory lane here. Parents as Teachers used to be a state program, I believe, or at least they received funding from the state to execute the program. I believe that funding went away. I guess my just kind of general question is the trajectory for getting this program funded or should we just kind of be expecting that it will be a Juno funded program, or is there any chance of state funding or possibilities of that?
In response to Mr. Smith's question, there is a current state support for it in the Department of Health grant. I also believe there was an increased amount that passed the state budget this year. That being said, I know a portion of that is federal funding that won't yet come for another year or so, and whether or not, I also believe that June does not currently qualify for that federal fund. So we also don't know how the governor will veto it, how they'll allocate it. So this is, they're looking really for certainty here over the next 3 years until they can be sure that, the state will actually follow through on the increased amounts that they've asked for. And specifically, in terms of the 399 or 400,000, if that's what the committee is comfortable with, I think that's fine. I think the really important part is that they have 3 years of funding they can count on so they can hire more people. They're really trying to address their wait list, and they already kind of are. They aren't able to get home visits for every family on the wait list, but they're starting to do initial reach outs for the first few weeks for every member on the wait list, but then they are waiting 9 months afterwards for full service. So they want to hire more people, and in order to do that, they really need 3 years of funding. So if 400,000 or 399,000 is what we can agree to, I think that's just fine.
Ms. Hughes Scandies, I think you had your hand up, but you are no longer on screen. Go ahead, Ms. Hughes Scandies.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and my extreme apologies. I'm very engaged in this meeting, but there was a knock at the door and I had to answer it. I was listening the whole time. I just wanted to, I'll object. I'll speak to my objection. If we, as someone said, memory lane, and I think I wish that I could, you know, play us back the highlights of how we voted for all the other items. I did a lot of objections, and I did that because of the number that we are going to end up with. I tried to apply a pretty narrow metric to all of our community requests this year, which means that while, you know, substantially worthy projects, I ended up with a lot of no's. But that being said, I just want to add 2 thoughts to this discussion, which is that I really feel like when we look at our goals and what we are trying to do, what we prioritize as an assembly, childcare is really high on our list of priorities. It's right after housing. And I feel like this is a service that is beneficial to our child population in Juneau. And then from a social determinants of health perspective, the sort of benefits that we see, the dividends of programs like this, the dividends of expanding wait lists. I have seen firsthand what a difference this Parents as Teachers program makes in the lives of the parents who are receiving the services. So strange to plug something that you are objecting to the payment of, but I just really want to try to remind folks, you know, I think if you voted perhaps in favor of something like Heat Smart, to really think through the merits of this program. But I'll wait and see what that amendment is, and I'll maintain my objection for now for the reasons that I objected to so many things.
Ms. Hale, do you have an amendment?
Yes, I would amend Ms. Atkinson's, Ms. Atkinson's motion just to bring the amount to 400,000 and retaining the 3-year certain funding as we did with Alaska Heat Smart. And I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objections to that? I see Mr. Smith.
An objection for a purpose of a question. Based on what we've approved so far, I'm looking at our FY25 projected ending fund balance, and I'm looking at this from page 14 of the packet. I don't know if it's the most current version, but just want to get confirmation from Ms. Flick or staff that based on what we've already approved, we're at projected fund balance is 9.8 million, 9.862. Just confirming that.
Ms. Flick.
Thank you, Chair Wall. Yes, Mr. Smith, you are correct. Looking at page 14, the unrestricted balance available is 9,862,729.
Mr. Smith, do you maintain your objection?
I actually had another question unless someone else did.
You can go ahead.
Very good. Ms. Flick, if I offered, I tried this last week, or I tried to say, spend X amount this for the FY25 budget year, and then add in to the manager's budget funding for the next 2 years, essentially to preserve a draw on fund balance this year, but provide some certainty to the organization in the future. If I did that and said, hey, move the number to a certain amount for this year, and then use fund balance in future years. Is that appropriate direction? And would that require you to, would that negate the need to increase the mill rate?
Mr. Smith, let me state your scenario back to make sure I understand it correctly. If you were to make a motion to only fund, let's say, $133,000 in FY '25 and direct the city manager to include 133,000 out of using one-time funding, fund balance for the next 2 years, that would not affect the mill rate. It would only be a fund balance impact. That was your question, and
It
that would
was.
be correct.
Yep. Thank you. And I think that's something that you guys can do that. Like, that's a reasonable thing for you to ask, or for me to ask, or for the body to ask you to do.
Ms. Fleck?
Certainly, the body can direct the city manager to include something in her budget. It would require then, if somebody objected to that, an actual motion to take it out of the manager's budget in the future, if there was an objection to it.
Very good. Ms. Hale has an amendment to the motion, so probably trying to amend that is not. What would you like to? Would that be in order, Madam Chair, or would you prefer I not do that at this moment?
I'd prefer you could do what you want, but I'd prefer we vote on the motion at hand, and then you can do with that what you like. Yeah.
I mean, I'd prefer to try my thing out now, but
That is within your right.
very good, Madam Chair. Thank you. I move that we instead you provide 133,000 from fund balance for FY '25, and then direct the manager to provide 133 using fund balance for FY '26 and '27 budget, and include that in the manager's budget.
Ms. Atkinson has an objection.
First, a question. Are you then decreasing the amount of the request by $1,000? Is that your intention?
I was maybe being unprecise with the numbers, but okay, I guess we could 133,333 each year.
Do you maintain your objection?
I do, if I can speak to
Yes.
the actual objection. If we're going to be pulling from fund balance for this, I do not understand the purpose of doing so out over 3 years. I think doing that now, we have the same levers to pull in future years if we want to discontinue that funding for any reason. The only thing it does is make it seem like we're not spending as much money. I would prefer that we reserve the amount we actually intend to at this moment spend now, instead of spreading it out over 3 years like that.
Thank you, Ms. Atkinson. I have Mayor Weldon, Ms. Hughes-Candies, and then Mr. Bryson.
I'll object for purposes of a question to the maker of the motion, but the attorney might have to weigh in. So if you do it in future years, if you're saying you want to take it from fund balance, I think that ties future assemblies, and I don't know if you can do that. And if you do it in the budget, then you're putting pressure on the mill rate for next year's budget. So what's your intention?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chairwell, thank you. My intention is just to reduce how much we draw the mill rate down, or excuse me, draw the fund balance amount down in the current year. You never know what's going to happen in the next year. We never know what opportunities. I just would prefer to spread it out as opposed to reduce it by $400,000 this year, because, you know, it may go up a little next year, and then people can look at that. To your question, Madam Mayor, I believe a future assembly. I don't believe it's binding a future assembly, because any future assembly with 5 votes could remove that from the budget. So
All right.
That's
I'll
my
maintain
understanding.
my objection for same reason Ms. Atkinson said.
Ms. Hughes Candies and then Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question, I think a question for the maker of the amendment. I think I lost, and I apologize for my rattledness. I think I lost the math there. That we're talking about 133,333 versus 166,666. And if I could just get a clarification on that from the maker, and then perhaps I'll speak, or perhaps I'll withdraw my amendment or withdraw my objection.
Directed at me?
No,
Uh,
I believe it's directed at Mr. Smith to
Yep.
clarify the numbers and
Yeah, I was just basing that off.
take a second.
Oh, pardon me.
I was
Okay.
just saying, if you need a second, go ahead.
No, I think I got it. I was basing that number off the amendment Ms. Hale made, and based on what my understanding is an acceptable reduced amount for city funding for the program. So that's right. Essentially, it's 400,000, but spread over 3 years. So.
Okay, thank you. And could I have a follow-up, Madam Chair?
Yes.
And then was that the number that Miss Atkinson said she had talked to the entity and that was okay?
Ms. Atkinson.
Yes, they would prefer obviously the 500,000, but they said that the most important part of it was that they have 3 years of funding that they can plan on.
Understood.
I have Mr. Bryson and then Ms. Hale.
I see where Mr. Smith's going. Maybe this is for Madam Manager. Is there any way that we could distribute 3 years of funding? We said we take the 400,000 as the amendment is right now, and we give them 133 this year, 133 next year, and so we don't give them the lump sum. We pay them 1 year at a time, but we allocate the money out of fund balance this year, so it's said and done, but then the city distributes it.
I believe that was Ms. Atkinson's motion, but I'll ask staff to confirm that that was correct. That was Ms. Atkinson's intent.
The model, from what I understand that Ms. Atkinson is using, is the same model that was used for heat smart appropriation. So yes, that would be doable.
That is my question. Thank you.
Ms. Hale, Mr. Kelly, and then Mr. Smith.
Just to explain where that 133,000 came from, it's on page 18 of the May 1st packet. And I really appreciate the crosswalk that you guys give us. So that's where that 133 a year came from.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I guess this could really be a question for anybody. I just want to confirm how deep we are in amendments. So at this point, Ms. Atkinson made a main motion. Madam Hale, Ms. Hale made an amendment and then proposed an amendment, and then Mr. Smith proposed a secondary amendment. Is that correct? So we'd be voting on that first. Okay. I think I'll also then just quickly speak. I think I agree with Ms. Atkinson about maintaining this as just a 1 year thing at this point. I believe it's a little more transparent to say we're spending this money now rather than breaking it apart over 3 years. Thank you.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one thing I wanted to bring up from that page 14 of the memo or of the packet. Our FY, and staff can correct me, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. FY 24, this current year projected ending balance 25.4 million. We are down to 9.8. Just pointing out that there is spending of $15 million in one fiscal year for out of fund balance. So that is why I'm sorry to make everyone go through this ringer of a thing, but trying to preserve fund balance. That won't be the last time you hear me say it, unfortunately, tonight. So that is what I'm trying to do. I get it. It's a little weird. I think it provides certainty and it preserves fund balance, which is going down rapidly. Thank you.
Ms. Hughes Candy, is a comment on the amendment to the amendment to the amendment? Just amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, apologies. I promise I won't be so scrambled on the rest of these. Based on I am not finding, and that it would make it seem out of order. I am not finding the nuance between Mr. Smith's motion and if Ms. Atkinson's original motion was to follow the sort of heat smart model, obligating the entire amount and then distributing it by thirds. I don't understand the difference between that and what Mr. Smith is proposing. Or is Mr. Smith, and then, so let me say this, and then you guys can tell me you're right, you're wrong. Ms. Atkinson proposed obligate it all, distribute it in thirds. Ms. Hale proposed that's fine, but lower the amount. And Mr. Smith is saying Atkinson's model with the lower amount. Is that correct?
No, you're close up to the end there, Ms. Hughes Candy. So, and people can correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is Ms. Atkinson's motion would obligate from fund balance the total amount to be dispersed over the next 3 years. Ms. Hale amended that, said same model, dispersed over 3 years, one lump sum right now, dispersed over 3 years, but allocate it now, appropriate it now, but at a lower amount. And then Mr. Smith is changing the model. So he is saying yes to Ms. Hale's amount, but he's saying only take $133,000 this year out of fund balance. And for the next 2 years, please include this in the manager's budget. From fund balance. And I know this is a lot. We did talk about this before the Heat Smart, and that was a long time ago about kind of the different options the Assembly has. So we have one of those options on the table with a certain amount. Are people ready to vote? Ms. Hughes Candy, did that clear up? I see head nods here that folks, that I got it right, but just want to make sure you understand.
I think that's sufficient. It's a very slim nuance between the two, but I appreciate you clarifying. I am ready to vote.
Okay. All right. I will speak before we vote. I will object to this amendment to an amendment. I think I share a different view of Mr. Smith about how much fund balance we need to preserve. I would rather, it may not be always that we have a sizable fund balance, and I'd rather spend that than require a mill rate change in the future. So with that, Ms. Wendell will call roll and maybe clarifying one more time what we're voting on.
Thank you, Chair. Well, would it be helpful if I repeated the original motion, the amendment, and then the amendment to the amendment? Okay. We have an original amendment made by Assemblymember Atkinson to approve $500,000 in support for AUIC for the Parents as Teachers program over 3 years. We have an amendment by Assemblymember Hale to change the amount for AUIC Parents as Teachers program from $500,000 to $400,000 over 3 years. We have an amendment to the amendment by Assemblymember Smith to, instead of providing $400,000 over 3 years, instead provide $133,333 from fund balance in FY25 and direct the manager to include $133,333 in FY26 and FY27 managers' proposed budgets as one-time funding. Assemblymember Smith,
Yes.
Assemblymember Atkinson,
No.
Assemblymember Kelly,
No.
Assemblymember Hale,
No.
Mayor Walden. Assemblymember Hughes Scandies,
No, sorry.
Assemblymember Bryson,
Yes.
Assemblymember Wachlaw Gadok,
No.
Chair Wool.
No.
Motion fails, 2 ayes, 7 nays.
All right, that brings us back to the First Amendment. Any objections to Ms. Hale's amendment, which would change the total amount from 500,000 to 400,000? Oh, Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I got ghosts in the computer in addition to everything else. I'll just keep it pretty brief, but I just really want to draw people's attention back to, I really wish we were at our limit. We did a good job last time as far as people really hung in there and kept the thread all the way through the pending list items that we got to. But with these two being so similar, I really wish we could have done them back to back. And they are very different services, and people may have their different reasons for voting for them. But it would be my sincere hope, even though I am also beating the preserve fund balance drum, that people would recognize how the parallel between, or rather how complementary this particular request is to our assembly goals. And would, if that's the amount they're requesting, that's the amount we would give them. So I think partly my objection is parity, but also it is because to reduce this amount, I don't think, I'll just leave it there.
Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you, Chair Wall. I'm not going to maintain my objection, but I do want to add some clarity, which is that though the request in the packet does say there is a deficit of 133,000, after meeting with AEYC, that number is a dynamic one. They were able to hire, for instance, a new person that has extensive experience in the field and does come a little more expensive than other employees. And she's excited to get working on caseload. But so as much as that 133 is, when they submitted that request, their current deficit, that is not necessarily what it is currently. And I think they said it was closer to 150 now. I am not going to maintain the objection because, like I said, I would rather it pass up for 3 years with this amount than nothing at all. But if that is just information I wanted to offer, and with that, I remove my objection.
Mr. Bryson.
I want to speak in favor of Ms. Hale's amendment. We've faced this type of situation before, an organization that's heavily dependent on city funding, but they don't have a large enough savings account. So they want to use city fund balance and transfer it into their savings account so they have savings, but they take from the city savings account to accomplish that. I found the memo. It was pretty clear. It was asking for the 133, but it asked for $100,000 to add to their fund balance. Our getting them operational funding, as Ms. Atkinson said, is the important component here. And we do that, and I don't think that we necessarily have to worry about their fund balance. If they have another problem, they're going to come and see us anyways. Thank you for the time.
All right, we have an amendment and we have an objection. Ms. Wendell, will you call roll?
On the amendment to change the amount for AEYC's Parents as Teachers program to 400,000 over 3 years, Assemblymember Hale,
Yes.
Assemblymember Hughes Scandies,
No.
Assemblymember Smith,
Yes.
Assemblymember Kelly,
Yes.
Assemblymember Atkinson,
Yes.
Mayor Walden.
Yes.
Assemblymember Bryson,
Yes.
Assemblymember Wachal Gadok,
Yes.
Chair Wall.
No.
Motion passes 7 ayes, 2 nays.
That brings us back to the original motion from Ms. Atkinson as amended by Ms. Hale. Any objections? All right, that is so moved. Oh, Ms. Hughes Candies. Sorry, I missed you.
I don't need to speak to it. You heard me all say what a great service it is. I'm just keeping to my ethos because without it, I will be lost.
We have a motion with an objection. Ms. Wendell, will you call roll?
Thank you. On the motion as amended to approve $400,000 in support for 8UIC for the Parents as Teachers program over 3 years. Assemblymember Atkinson.
Yes.
Assemblymember Hughes Candies.
No.
Assemblymember Wachal Gadok.
Yes.
Assemblymember Hale.
Yes.
Assemblymember Bryson.
Yes.
Assemblymember Kelly.
Yes.
Assemblymember Smith.
Yes.
Mayor Weldon.
Yes.
Chair Wall.
Yes.
Motion passes 8 ayes, 1 nay.
All right, let's not spend a half hour on the rest of these, shall we? That brings us to Juneau Economic Development Council's Choose Juneau Research Project. We have 3 sponsors for this project, Mr. Bryson, Ms. Egginson, and Mr. Smith. I will take a volunteer who wants to make the motion. I see Mr. Bryson's hand first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the Assembly add to the, or approve on the funding list, the Juneau Economic Development Council Choose Juneau Research Project for $115,000 one-time funding. And I ask for unanimous consent.
Objections to the motion. I see Mayor Weldon and Ms. Hughes Candies.
I'm just objecting, and I don't think it's a study that needs to be done at this time, and I'm very sensitive to our fund balance going lower and lower.
Ms. Hughes Candies. You're on mute.
Yep, I got it. I'm killing it here. I didn't see tremendous value in this request. I support JDC going and doing that themselves, but I don't think this is worthy of city funding at this time.
Ms. Hale, then Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll also object. I think that if we were to support a study like this, I would want it to be more robust, and I'd want to make sure that we have the right entities engaged in the study. And so I don't support spending this money on this now.
Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we don't plan for the future, how can we create roadmaps on how to get to the goals that we want to see Juneau? We've gotten a taste of some of this Choose Juneau research project. We've seen the effectiveness of some of the studies, and when we talk about scenario planning, our actions will benefit from the information that would come from this study. So I would ask for your support. Thank you for the time.
Any other member comments? Okay, we have a motion and an objection. Ms. Wendell, will you call roll?
Thank you, Chair Wall. On the motion to approve JEDC's Choose Juneau Research Project request of $115,000 in one-time funding, Assemblymember Bryson.
Yes.
Mayor Weldon.
No.
Assemblymember Smith.
Yes.
Assemblymember Wachal Gadok.
Yes.
Assemblymember Hale.
No.
Assemblymember Atkinson. No. Assemblymember Hughes Candies.
No.
Assemblymember Kelly.
Yes.
Chair Wall,
My first deciding vote, no.
motion fails, 4 ayes, 5 nays.
That brings us to Travel Juneau's visitor count research. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Chair Wall. I move the Travel Juneau Visitor Count Research project for $110,000.
Are there objections? Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am going to object to this. I feel like this is the sort of thing that if Travel Juneau is not adequately funded to where they feel like that they can robustly meet their mission and meet the goals that they have set and meet the goals that the assembly has set, then that is something I would want them to communicate to us. But this is the sort of thing that I would, the same way I say, go on and do that research, JDC, or go on and do that study. You can do it without city money. This is the sort of thing that I feel like Travel Juneau should be working on, and I was not compelled by the materials provided that this was necessary to obtain additional one-time funds. So, and I'll also say that if we do this one-time thing, it doesn't really serve us for planning process or planning purposes or for other purposes if you don't have metrics to compare it to. So I'm going to be a no on this.
Mr. Bryson, then Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think my question is for Madam Manager. I thought we authorized a study that was a recommendation of the Visitor Industry Task Force. And didn't we authorize and fund some level of tourism study? I thought that would have been over this year that happened.
So every year we do a survey, a visitor industry survey that asks kind of community sentiment about tourism, specifically cruise ship tourism. I am not aware of a study, I'm not aware of something that would replicate the visitor count research that CBJ does. I don't know if my longer tenured colleagues can remember some things.
That answers my question. Thank you, Madam Manager.
Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to object in part for the reasons cited by Ms. Hughes Candies, that we'll do this study and then we'll need another study and then another, and we're not really certain about how that would play out, although I know that was addressed in the information provided. I'm also objecting, similar to my objection to our last item. If we want to do a research project, I think we really need to make sure that we have the right people on board and the right methodology, and we understand the repeatability, so we don't have that kind of material presented to us at this time.
Other comments? I'll make one. I'll be in favor of this motion. I hear Ms. Hughes Candies and Ms. Hale. One moment in time is not as useful as doing it over and over again, but it's still useful. We don't have this data. It's because it's hard to collect. I'm hopeful that Travel Juneau will use this point in time data to figure out what metrics they can collect more regularly that can be proxies. But this is one of those data needs that we continually ask for, and so here's a way to get it. And with that, we have a motion and objection. Oh, I see one more hand, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question. Can we like with this money attach a little note that says, and you should do this at the appropriate time using Travel Juneau funds, in the future, like this is, can we do that?
Staff, I think this is a question for you, maybe your attorney. Are we allowed to put restrictions such as the one that Mr. Smith said on any funding.
I understand his comment to be, are we allowed to provide legislative intent, for lack of a better word, for the use of these funds? And I mean, I think the Assembly is allowed to do whatever you want, and then we would work with Travel Juno to give our best advice on how to meet that legislative intent, and then the Assembly would decide if that was meant. I would request that it be clarified, though, if that is, if you do wish to add an intent language to this.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, do you have, I'll move on for questions. Did your question get answered?
It did. Thank you.
Okay. Mayor Weldon.
I was going to answer it also. I believe a no vote does just that.
I have Miss Atkinson.
I guess I just had to follow up on the intent language thing because I'm also a little confused. Like legislative intent would then be not really enforceable. Just to double check that.
All right, we have a motion. We have a motion and an objection, unless there are any other comments. Ms. Wendell, will you call roll?
Thank you. On the motion to approve Travel Juno's visitor count research project request of $110,000. Assemblymember Smith.
No.
Assemblymember Hughes Scandies.
No.
Assemblymember Kelly.
Yes.
Assemblymember Hale. Assemblymember Atkinson.
No.
Mayor Weldon.
No.
Assemblymember Bryson.
Yes.
Assemblymember Wahal Gadak.
No.
Chair Wall.
Yes.
Motion fails, 3 ayes, 6 nays.
All right, that brings us to Juneau Economic Development Council's scenario thinking strategic long-term planning tool. Mr. Kelly or Ms. Hale, whoever wants to take this one.
I'll do this one, thank you. Mr. Kelly and I agreed, I'm not just grabbing it. So this is well, first I'll move $80,000 for the JEDC Scenario Thinking Strategic Long-Term Planning Tool. I would like to amend my motion and speak to that amendment, if I may, before we start. Thank you, Ms. Wall. JEDC in their Innovation Summit did a really superb job introducing scenario thinking and introducing this planning tool, and several of us were there for that introduction, and it looks like it could be extremely powerful. It was very hard at that time because it was compressed so much. It looks like it could be extremely powerful. However, I would advocate, or my motion will be, that the $80,000 go to the manager's budget, and the manager manage actually hire a contractor, most likely, to manage a steering committee. And included in the steering committee would be JEDC, would be the Chamber of Commerce, other organizations and groups, but also included in the steering committee would be our own community development department, because this would lay the groundwork for the comprehensive plan, which we've been talking about for years, and we need to lay that groundwork. If we have it, if we pull it out of one of those organizations and have that in the manager's budget with a skilled facilitator managing it, that removes ownership by any one entity and creates trust among the entities. So that is my amendment to my motion, is that 80,000 go to the manager's budget.
Objection to the amendment. I see Mr. Smith's hand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess it's not so much it's an objection for a question just about the whole thing. Like, I guess my question is, could this not, and should it maybe be part of a comprehensive plan type of, I mean, should we just do it all then? Or anyway, I'd appreciate a staff staff's thought on that question.
Thank you for that question. So I do think that in order for this exercise to have value for the community, it needs to be part of the comprehensive plan somehow. The comprehensive plan is not just a dusty plan that we set on our shelf. It really is the guiding document for land use planning. That being said, I also, having been in these strategic thinking conversations for the last couple of years, agree that if the city owns it, or one organization owns it as like, this is the launch of the comp plan, we would struggle with that. Like, how relevant is it? Is it useful? Is it just a city thing or is it a full community thing? So, I think that the intention here is to try to strike that balance between being something owned by any one organization, but that is still useful for the city's major land use planning document. And an imperfect solution for challenging new times, but I think that I'm excited to give it a try.
Ms. Hughes Scandies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a clarification on what Manager Custer just said. Are you suggesting that the comp plan process is not owned by the city? Question mark?
No, I'm sorry. What I meant was the question that I understood from Assembly Member Smith was, can't we just roll this into our comprehensive plan? And if you recall, I did reply to one of the staff questions, written questions, that we could launch the comprehensive plan with a strategic thinking model. And we could use JEDC to do that. That's certainly something that we could do. So the comprehensive plan is 100% owned by CBJ, but the thought work of this strategic, I want to call it strategic thinking, but it's scenario thinking. I'm sorry, like there's a strategic doing model that it like my mind mixes the two terminologies. So the scenario thinking, how important it is that that process itself is multi-organizational. So that is, I was specific to that kind of process when I talked about it not being owned by any one organization.
Understood. Thank you.
Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Manager, and if I may speak to Mr. Smith's comment, it's a good question, and I think that's a question that we've all kind of grappled with. And the reason I'm proposing that we actually have it facilitated through the manager's office with a skilled, trained facilitator is that, as we know, every single organization carries with it some baggage. And if it's managed, for example, by our community development department, we know that there's baggage there. And any organization will carry some baggage. And so the idea is to have those organizations on a steering committee and working together. I also want to just add, and we did this scenario thinking, and I really thank JEDC for bringing it to Juneau. We did this as part of our retreat last December. We just did a little brief scenario thinking exercise and saw very starkly the scariness of certain futures. And I think we all need to be thinking really hard about that, because there's a lot of people in Juneau that have a range of thoughts on where Juneau might be going. And I think on this assembly, we know we want to build Juneau as we move into the future. Thank you.
Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kelly, this may be what you're speaking to, but as the co-sponsor, maybe you could weigh in on your thoughts on Ms. Hale's amendment as kind of part of the one of the person who was excited about this.
Great, thank you. And yes, it was my intent to address this. I think Ms. Hale's amendment actually makes this process stronger. I believe that we should go into anything that we do. Why I voted yes on the last couple items was because I believe that we should go in with our eyes wide open and planning for different, planning for our future, having a structured conversation about our future. I believe Ms. Hale's amendment makes this stronger because it brings in, unlike those other motions, I believe that this one actually broadens the stakeholder group. It broadens the group that is involved, the groups that are contributing to this. It's not just the city taking this on by itself, using its own resources. It's really the community coming together to plan this. And so I think Ms. Hale's amendment has the effect of strengthening this motion.
Mayor Weldon?
Just kind of a point of order, has there been an objection to Ms. Hale's amendment?
No. There's not been any objections to Ms. Hale's amendment. All right, that brings us back to the original motion to do scenario, because there was no objections, scenario thinking. Any objections? I see Miss Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think man, why do we all want to call her Madam Hale? I think Ms. Hale's amendment made that much stronger, much better. I can feel a lot better about that, but I do really feel like this is somewhat duplicative of the comp plan process. If you have a good comp plan process, and I understand the differences between them, and definitely I think scenario thinking is good, and this I will keep it short because it's less than $100,000, but I will be a no for many of the same reasons as my other no's.
Anyone else would like to speak to this motion? Seeing none, Ms. Wendell, will you call roll?
Thank you, Chair Wall. On the motion as amended to move to add $80,000 to the manager's budget for scenario thinking, strategic long-term planning for this effort to be led by a steering committee. Assemblymember Hale.
Yes.
Assemblymember Hughes Candies.
No.
Assemblymember Kelly.
Yes.
Assemblymember Wachal Gadak.
Yes.
Assemblymember Atkinson.
Yes.
Mayor Weldon.
Yes.
Assemblymember Smith.
No.
Assemblymember Bryson.
Yes.
Chair Wall.
Yes.
The motion as amended passes, 7 ayes, 2 nays.
All right, that brings us to the Downtown Business Association Operational Support and Main Street America Accreditation. Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the Assembly approve the pending list item, Downtown Business Association Operational Support and Main Street America Accreditation for $75,000. Am I speak to it, Madam Chair? This is, again, another small investment in the downtown community that every activity they do, every new customer they bring downtown, every office they fill, pushes back that or adds to the resiliency of downtown, and it will help invigorate downtown. Every office, every local small business that shuts down downtown, that goes the opposite way, downtown is filled in with tourism. That's the growing industry right now. For Juneau to be able to push back and have more local activities and more local businesses and more local energy downtown, we must invest in downtown. That's why I strongly support the $75,000 ask for DBA. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the time.
Objections? Mayor Weldon and then Ms. Hughes Candies.
I'm objecting for purposes of a question, and my question is, why do they want the extra amount? I haven't seen really their defense of that argument. FY24, they had 35,000, and now they're asking for 75.
Mr. Bryson, do you have an answer to that? I might have a little bit.
I do not have that answer.
I don't know that I have the full answer, but I do remember that they did ask for 75,000 last year, and it was only the Assembly reduced that amount. And so I imagine the same reason they wanted $75,000 last year was in previous years is the reason they want 75,000 this year. Ms. Hughes Candies and then Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm gonna object to this and be a no vote. I don't find this funding to be a worthy request of fund balance at this time. In terms of speaking to what Downtown Business Association does, it is not to say what they do is not worthy or without merit. I do find them to have enough similarities when I look at their membership to ponder why we fund something like Downtown Business Association. But the chamber is self-funding from, and I shouldn't speak to the funding of the chamber because honestly, I think we have some chamber members on the assembly, but I don't know how that works. But I think the Downtown Business Association, I would prefer to see, again, go forth, do great things, and do so perhaps not with city funds. I will also say, just a quick reply to Mr. Bryson's comment, plenty of Downtown Business Associations membership and connection, what drives their lifeblood is tourism, and they strongly will tell you that. And put signs in their windows that say so. So I don't see Downtown Business Association necessarily as, stopping tourism's progression. Not that I'm trying to stop that anyway, but just a quick response to get that on the record.
Mr. Smith, Mr. Kelly, and then Mayor Weldon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm sorry if I missed it or just dropped it for a second. This is a recurring, I guess this is a recurring request. Two, there's already $40,000 in the manager's budget. So this is really just a motion for an additional 35. If I could get clarification on those 2 points, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, it is recurring. No, there is not money in the manager's budget for this request. Mr. Smith, did that answer your question?
It did. So I guess I would actually, but now as a follow-up, just so I'm clear, if we do not fund this in any amount, it could be 75, there would be nothing for DBA. There would be no city funds for DBA, and they received last year $40,000.
For operational support, yes, we did approve a DBA grant using marine passenger fees at our last meeting at $90,000. I'm answering from my memory. I'm getting some head nods, but maybe I'll send it to staff to make sure that I've answered all of Mr. Smith's questions correctly.
Ms. Wall, you are correct in your memory.
I have Mr. Kelly and then Mayor Weldon.
Thank you. I was actually just a question for the chair. Was it your intent that if anybody is available to answer questions that they would be available, or that we would do so?
No, we told partners that their time for answering questions was 2 meetings ago, and so I don't want to give anyone who's here that opportunity just because others did not get that opportunity. Mayor Weldon.
I would be a no vote, so I would offer up an amendment, and the amendment would be to give them 40,000 instead of 75,000. Give them the 40,000 like we did last year.
All right, we have an amendment, and we have several objections. I'll go to Ms. Atkinson and then Mr. Kelly.
Just for purposes of a question, I make a motion, would that be 40,000 one time or recurring? One time, gotcha. My objection.
I saw Mr. Kelly. Were you objecting? Go ahead if you want to speak to your objection.
I don't need to speak to it. Thank you.
Mr. Bryson.
Thank you. Actually, I wanted to thank the mayor for the amendment. I think this is a good compromise between the Assembly's intention of trying to hold the line and be frugal in our pending list, but I do still see this as a valuable investment in the business community downtown. the business community that generates sales tax revenue. Every ounce of help that we give to an organization that benefits the business communities is future sales tax revenue. So I would strongly ask for the support of the 40,000 so we can get DBA a little bit of money. Thank you for the time.
Okay, we have a motion and we have an amendment and we have an objection to that amendment. So Ms. Wendell, will you call roll?
We have an original motion to approve $75,000 for the Downtown Business Association's operational support and Main Street America accreditation request. And we have an amendment to instead approve $40,000, which is flat funding over FY24, and to approve it as one-time funding. Mayor Weldon. Assemblymember Bryson.
Yes.
Assemblymember Wahal Gadak.
No.
Assemblymember Hale.
Yes.
Assemblymember Hughes Candies.
Yes.
Assemblymember Smith.
Yes.
Assemblymember Kelly.
No.
Assemblymember Atkinson.
Yes.
Chair Wall.
No.
Motion passes 6 ayes, 3 nays.
Brings us back to the original motion as amended. Do we have any objections? Ms. Hughes Candies, would you like to speak to your objection?
Same reasons. Don't need to speak to it.
Any other committee comments? All right. Ms. Wendell, will you call roll?
On the motion as amended to approve $40,000 for the Downtown Business Association's operational support as one-time funding. Assemblymember Bryson.
Yes.
Assemblymember Hughes Candies.
No.
Assemblymember Atkinson.
Yes.
Assemblymember Hale.
Yes.
Mayor Weldon. Assemblymember Smith.
Yes.
Assemblymember Wahal Gadak.
No.
Assemblymember Kelly.
Yes.
Chair Wall.
No.
The motion as amended passes 6 ayes, 3 nays.
All right, we're going to keep going. We're going to finish this before our break. That brings us to Juneau Mountain Bike Alliance. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very excited to be the sponsor of this request. The JMBA is requesting $40,000 one-time funding for an about $80,000 project. So over nearly half is matched. They are looking for additional grants. They are using member funds to put in this new track. As maybe people do not know, but there is a mountain bike track out under Thunder, so located in the valley in an area that does not have a ton of where they could use more recreational opportunities. These grant funds, a wide myriad of funds. People are coming to Juneau as a result of this track. Anyway, we're getting visitation. It's creating economy around the sport. So encourage support of this small one-time fund. So I ask for unanimous consent.
Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I need to declare a conflict. I own a bicycle shop, but I have no financial tie to this project or program. There are at least 5 other businesses in town that sell bicycles. I spoke with the city attorney. It did not disqualify me, but again, it is up to you guys. I do not believe a trail being built in Juneau has a direct effect to my bike shop, but I'll leave it up to the body.
Does anyone like to speak to Mr. Bryson's potential conflict? I see Ms. Hughes Candies. Oh, is that a accidental hand?
That was a hand for the objection to the motion, not to Mr.
right.
Bryson. I think Mr. Bryson is fine.
I see no objections to you participating and voting. Thank you, Mr. Bryson. All right, so that brings us to objections to the motion. Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just put myself back on you. Yes, I will object to this motion. It is a small amount of money, so I will try to, relative to the size of our budget, not relative to my budget, but relative to the city's budget. So I'll try to keep this relatively brief. I think again, when we look at community requests, when we look at our pending list, it's hard because they're good projects, right? We rarely get bad projects. So I'm just putting this through the lens of how does this serve our goals? How does this, and Mr. Smith spoke to some that ways that he thinks it does, but how do things serve our goals? How do things serve this entire community, and who ends up on this list and who does not? And so looking at all that, I think it's a great project, but when I compare it to the metric that I use for this pending list, I have to be a no vote.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I think it's finally sunk in. Ms. Hughes Candies has said we can't be all things to all people. I think so. I am objecting it for, I think, some of the same reasons as Ms. Hughes Candies. I also believe that this project might have a net benefit to our community. I don't think taxpayer dollars should go towards it, though.
Mr. Smith.
I guess I just would say to that, economic development, we know people like to be in Juneau because of outdoor activities that brings people here to live. It keeps people here. It brings visitors. We provided $50,000 last year as to give the climbing group some funding for some of their planning. We do this, and again, it's about half of the project. So anyway, that's all I want to say. Thanks.
Mayor Weldon.
Thank you. Ms. Hughes Candies, don't fall off your chair. I'm actually going to speak to this project. This is their phase 2. They did phase 1, which involves at least 3 trails already, if not 4, and they did it all on their own. So this is just $40,000 to help them with phase 2. So normally I would say no. I agree with what Ms. Hughes Candies says for the most part, but this is they're coming to us for the last bit of money instead of the first. So I'll be a yes vote.
Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also support this, and I think that, for example, we fund our Parks and Recreation Department, and we do that because we understand the critically important nature of recreation in our community. It's a hard place to live, and the more we can do relatively small things like this to make happier people in Juneau, the better it is for our community. So I am in support of this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm also in support of this. The way I looked at it, the $40,000 has leveraged a lot of trail work. So we're paying a very small amount for hundreds of thousands, or at least $100,000 worth of trail work done. And I like the point that they asked us last. So we're getting the recreation activities that Juneauites like, and this group did not come to the city first. So I really appreciate that, and I'll support this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. Thank you for indulging me in a second go around. I actually think this is a relatively small amount, and I have I think been persuaded by the comments of the other assembly members at the table, so I may be switching to a yes vote. My objection.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. I'll speak, I'll be objecting to this for many of the same reasons Ms. Candies did. I support this project. It's a great project. I also voted against the ski club and the climbing gym, all of recreational facilities that I use. To me, this comes down to, I think if the city wants to support groups like this that are, for all the reasons Mr. Smith said, very important to our community and to our economic development and our goals, then we should maybe create a little mini grant program or some sort of way that we can make sure that there are many groups in our community that are doing work like these groups. I think these groups have gotten in our ear because we know them and they are great advocates for their work, but for me, it's a process vote, so I'll be a no. We have a motion and objection. Ms. Wendell, will you call roll?
Thank you, Chair Wall. On the motion to approve $40,000 for the Juneau Mountain Bike Alliance Thunder Mountain Bike Park Phase 2 request, Assemblymember Smith,
Yes.
Assemblymember Hughes Scandies,
No.
Assemblymember Kelly,
Yes.
Assemblymember Hale,
Yes.
Assemblymember Atkinson,
Yes.
Mayor Weldon,
Yes.
Assemblymember Bryson,
Yes.
Assemblymember Wahal Gadak,
No.
Chair Wall.
Oh,
Motion passes 6 ayes, 3 nays.
all right, nice job, everybody. We are down to our last item, the Alaska Small Business Development Center's operational support. Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the Finance Committee approve the Alaska Small Business Development Center operational support of $28,500, and I would ask for unanimous consent, and if I could speak to it. Again, small seeds of investment. If look back at the SBA or the SBDC, they help create businesses in Juneau that have paid millions of dollars in sales tax. So for this very small amount, it's an investment to help continue growing the business community in Juneau. It'll probably return that level of sales tax in like a 2-year time. So I would ask that we support this. Thank you.
Ms. Atkinson.
Sorry, just a question for the maker of the motion to clarify. What was the amount of the request you moved? Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I'm gonna, go ahead, Ms. Flick.
Could we have clarification, Mr. Bryson? This is out of recurring or is this a one-time allocation out of fund balance? On the pending list, it's recurring. We just wanted to make sure that was your intent.
That was not my intent. I definitely wanted to approve it this time. I think my intent was to have it as a one-time funding for this event.
Can I ask a question of staff? Because I believe there's been some confusion about pieces of this. My understanding is that this has been in the manager's budget in the past, and I'm sorry I didn't go do my research to figure out when that was, but maybe you could let me know that in previous years.
So on the webpage for the assembly grants, looking at our history, the Juneau Small Business Development Center has been funded at least since 2013. That's the beginning of that particular chart. It has ranged anywhere from $55,000 to, it looks like a low of 23, but it's been consistently 28.5 from 2019 through FY24. I don't know any particular details of if it had been included as part of the manager's proposed or done through a pending list prior. I don't have history on that.
Okay, thank you. And the manager is looking at me like she has something to add.
Just, just in consulting with Deputy Manager Barr, Our memory is this has always been a pending list item and not included in the manager's budget. Certainly, I mean, this is my first budget, this is your third, so at least that's our memory. 3 years.
I see some long-term assembly members have not seen this in the past, I believe. So, okay, Mr. Bryson, thank you for that clarity. Mr. Bryson, would you clarify your motion in terms of whether you would, for the group, in terms of whether you would like it to be recurring or one time?
I was going to advocate for one time on the pending list. I kind of feel like the pending list is our like one-time approval of things. If the Small Business Development Center is a reoccurring activity on behalf of the assembly, I would like to have the discussion if that should be in the manager's budget and not put up to us every year to decide if we're going to like decide a reoccurring thing or not. If we want it reoccurring, we should give it to the manager's budget. But right now, I'm only asking for one-time funding.
Mayor Weldon.
I'm going to object for purposes of the question. I would go with the one-time funding this time, but I would ask, can staff look and see what the history has been? Because I have a different recollection than the city manager and the deputy city manager. I don't recall that we've been asked this before, so I think it's been in the budget. So I'll remove my objection and go with the one time, but I think it's been in the budget.
Ms. Hughes-Gandies.
The mayor just said what I would have suggested.
I'll speak to this and agree that I think this probably should be recurring, but I'm fine approving it one time and we can revisit next year how we want to move forward with this. So I don't object either. All right, I see no objections to that motion, so that is so moved. And we are done with the pending list for the moment. I'm gonna have us take a 10-minute break, come back at 6:57, and we will talk about mill rates. Do we have our online folks back with us? A moment to say thank you to the folks on the East Coast who are tuning in for this important meeting. All right, I see some thumbs up. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna come to agenda topic number 3, set mill rates. Before we jump in, we'll do a few things. First, I'm gonna ask staff to give us a little update about where we're at after the decisions we just made. I did get a question on kind of the difference between what we're doing under item number 3 and what we'll be doing in item number 4. Item number 4 will really be the official action the assembly takes when we have had all the budget conversations we want to have to move our decisions out of this committee to the full assembly. And so I don't expect a lot of discussion on item number 4. So just to say, if you want to talk about the mill rate, item number 3 is the time to do that, just to provide clarity. With that, I'll send it over to staff to give us a little update on where we are with our fund balance, given the decisions that the body just made.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair Wall. Congratulations on making it through your pending list. You have in your unrestricted general fund balance, $9,274,229 available after the decisions that you've made. $9,274,229.
Thank you. All right, so for this discussion, there's lots of different ways that we could choose to have this discussion. This is a complex decision. I think based on our retreat discussion, the assembly members have lots of different philosophies about how we should set our mill rates. What I would ask the body to do in terms of starting this conversation is I'm going to ask if there are any proposals for changing the mill rate from what the manager proposed. And if people have a proposal, I would like them to make their proposal for the mill rate as well as the additional actions that they would want to take that would still get us to a balanced budget for FY25. And so the idea being that the body will kind of consider comprehensive proposals that both change the mill rate and account for it in other ways. And what I'd ask from the body as well is that instead of making amendments on top of amendments on top of amendments, let's hear from from proposal makers, and you can just, we can talk through our opinions on them. And then if we don't have 5 votes on those proposals, we can go back to the drawing board and try something else. So just, we'll do the best we can through this. I just don't want us making a ton of amendments, so I'll try to manage that. I know Ms. Hale has a proposal to get us started, which is helpful, that you have in front of you. We can start there, but let's talk about questions on, first I'll open it up for questions generally about this discussion. I see Mr. Smith's hand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had I would appreciate just a clarification or a piece of information from staff, and that's how much did our actions on the pending list increase or affect? Anyway, did any of our recurring items, did we pass recurring items? And if so, how much would they, require from, to be paid for with recurring funds like the mill rate?
Thank you, Mr. Smith. We should have clarified that, staff. Ms. Flick.
Absolutely. So on the pending list, there was only one item that was recurring in nature, and that was the outside the cap funding for the school district, but that was already incorporated in the manager's proposed budget. So your adoption of that amount does not have an impact on the proposed mill rate that we started with back on April the 6th. All the other actions on the pending list were one-time in nature and only affected your fund balance.
Good question, Mr. Smith. Thank you for clarifying that. Mayor Weldon.
So just to clarify from you, I also have a proposal. So do you want all the proposals put forth, or are we just going to talk about Ms. Hale's proposal? I didn't quite understand.
Yes, I think we have to take it one proposal at a time. And so what I would say is, as we discuss Ms. Hale's proposal, if you have objections, then you're welcome to say what you would rather see, or so that Ms. Hale can, remove her proposal if the body is not there. Does that make sense? It's not elegant, but it's, there's kind of no elegant way to have this conversation. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. And just to make sure I just understood this, so are we expecting each proposal to be moved one at a time, or could we maybe have a discussion and then each could move their proposals?
I think we're gonna try to just have a discussion. So we'll take so what I am imagining is Ms. Hale's got something that she's ready to go. She'll say, this is why I think it should be this way. And then I would say, are there objections to the proposal? And I would ask the objectors to talk about their objections. And if it's, I want to do something else, then say that, and then we can work through it that way once we know where the body is. Ms. Hale.
Thank you, and it's just so that I don't feel too selfish. I think maybe what you're saying is I want to do something else. I want to make sure that other people's proposals, which may be radically different than mine, carry full weight.
Yes, that is the intent. And that's why I don't want a bunch of people objecting and voting on anyone's proposal. I just want to start with one, hear where the body is on that one, and then we can move on to other proposals. And we'll see how it goes, and we can do whatever the body wants if this isn't working. Okay, so I'm gonna hand it over to Miss Hale to describe her proposal. She has also printed it out and sent it to you all. And if people need a little time to look it over, that's fine. But maybe, Ms. Hale, you want to just give an introduction to it, and then I'll see if folks need a little more time to process.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my proposal is two-pronged, and it's really driving from the outcry that we are hearing from our residents to offer some relief on property taxes. We all know that assessed values went up last year in particular, a little bit this year, but not a lot. But last year in particular, and last year we worked very hard at bringing that mill rate down, but people felt that it wasn't enough. The bulk of my proposal is focused on bringing the debt service mill rate down from 1.20 to 0.95. That extra room in that debt service mill rate is not necessary for us to pay our debts now. And we have been assured by Finance Director Flick at our May 8th meeting, I believe, that we could actually take on additional debt and structure it in such a way that it would not require an increase to the mill rate. It's unusual for a city to maintain their debt service mill rate at the same level when they don't need that debt service mill rate. And I know much of the thinking of previous finance directors and previous assemblies has been maintain that debt service mill rate so that when we need to take on more debt, we'll have it. I would argue our populace needs relief now. And if we need to take on, if we need to increase the debt service mill rate in the future or some other portion of the mill rate in the future, that's the time to do it. But for us to be paying off debt early in order to maintain that debt service mill rate, and therefore burdening our taxpayers with excess taxes, I advocate bringing it down 2.95. The second part of my proposal, as you can see, is to take approximately 600,000 of the added approximately $1.1 million in the manager's budget for maintenance of the two schools that we are taking on and the administration building. Take 600,000 of that and take it out of our general fund balance, which would bring our fund balance down to, it looks like, 8.67 million. I would argue that we do that because we have talked about, although we haven't officially had that position, that we want those buildings to be cost revenue neutral if we can, as much as we can. And we are going into the process of figuring that out now. So I would argue to take approximately half of that money and take it out of fund balance. That would give us an additional 0.09 mil savings so that our total mill rate would go from 10.32 mils to 9.98 mils. And I'm eager to hear what my fellow assembly members think of this proposal. Thank you.
I know the folks online maybe just found this in their email, or I texted some of them. Does anyone need a few minutes to look up? Ms. Hill did a great job of explaining what is in here, but I want to make sure people have the time they need. So I'll just see if anyone needs a few more minutes. Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thanks. That was a comprehensive verbal, but since I just got that, if you don't mind taking 2 minutes, and I'll come back if I'm ready before then, or even a minute, so I can visually look at this and comprehend it in another way.
Yep, 2 minute at ease.
Madam Chair, oh, you guys are there, but I'm back whenever you guys are ready.
All right, I see Ms. Hughes Scandies is back. All right, I will take comments, especially from anyone who objects to Ms. Hale's, pieces of Ms. Hale's proposal. Mayor Weldon.
I appreciate Ms. Hale's proposal. However, I would object. I think it's a little bit aggressive at this time in our lives, although I do have my own proposal, like I said before, which would bring it down to 10.04. My main objection is I think the debt service rate I would disagree with the most, although part of mine is debt service reduction. It's just not as deep because I think that hamstrings what we're trying to do. And I don't have a problem with paying off debt early, because if you keep debt out there, then you're paying more interest. So if you can pay it off early, then you're not accruing that interest. And I just think things coming up that we are going to need bonds for, and particular if we get anywhere with the North Douglas Crossing a few years out, I just don't want to hamper our debt service. So that's my main objection. And my second objection would be I found a way to propose something without hitting our fund balance. So I would not be voting for Ms. Hales, although I appreciate all the time and effort she's put into it, and it's a good place to start.
Thank you, Mayor Weldon. I see a lot of hands, so apologies if these don't come in the exact right order. I have Ms. Atkinson and Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Chair Wall. I also appreciate, Ms. Hill, the work you've done on this, and I definitely agree with your reasoning on the debt service mill rate. I think that makes a lot of good sense. I do have some concerns about reducing the area-wide mill rate. I understand one of our priorities when we're looking at filling the school buildings will be, net zero impact on budget, or as close as we can get to that, but we don't yet know how much of those costs we're going to be able to offset, what kind of proposals. Public Works hasn't had a chance to look at it yet. And so I'm not sure I'm comfortable with offsetting half of that with fund balance at this time, but I do really like your debt service part of your proposal.
Thank you, Ms. Atkinson, and thank you all commenters so far for your clarity of comment. Mr. Bryson, Mr. Smith, and Ms. Hughes Scandies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't think I could have come up with better numbers if I had spent more time on it. These are very ideal reductions. I kind of looked at it on, you have a house, we all have mortgage payments, pretty common thing. You pay an extra on your mortgage payments, great. It benefits the household, you have more equity in it. But if you're trying to figure out how to make ends meet, and you're not quite sure how to pay all the bills and pay for groceries, that's not a time when you make extra principal payments on your house. That's kind of the scenario that we're in right now. We're in a different scenario. We were accelerating on our debt service. I couldn't ask for a better thing fiscally. But where the community's at right now, the 0.25 reduction is a responsible reduction that's still, it's not going to the minimum, but it's taking the citizens' request. And so I thank you for using that math, Ms. Hale. Thank you.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Chair Wall. I feel like you've doomed me with the clarity comment, so here I go. I thank Ms. Hale for her work and thinking on this. I'm also in the camp of, I feel, I talked about it at the retreat. Personally, I'm actually would think of dropping the mill rate to what it should be to pay debt. I understand the arguments for paying off debt early. I think the other thing, though, I think a lot about is the public trust and getting community support. I hear what Mayor Weldon said about debt capacity, and that I'm thinking that through, and that was a salient and good point. I guess one thing I'd say is, when the question is on the ballot, people are looking at the project. The question on the ballot, when we're talking about geo bonds here, it says what it would do, how much it would increase the mill rate. It doesn't say, oh, but due to the mill rate being this, it actually wouldn't increase it. Like it just says what it would increase. At least that's my understanding, and happy to have staff correct me if I'm wrong. I'm also, I kind of agree with Ms. Atkinson about the reducing the area-wide mill rate for the schools. I appreciate what Ms. Hale's trying to do there. I guess I'm a little bit in the camp of I don't want to count my chickens before they hatch. We do not know how much we're going to get for those, for the use of those facilities. I don't want to set this mill rate at a low level and then just give and that isn't going to cover continual expenses and put on a future assembly the need to have to increase it should those funds not materialize. So I don't believe I'm supportive of that effort. But thank you very much for the time, and thanks for the good work of everyone.
Ms. Euskandis and Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just echo kudos. This is very thoughtful, very well laid out proposal, and I appreciate that. I think I would not be in favor of this proposal, and I think to best try to help us get to where something is where we can find 5 votes in agreement. I think the points that I'm starting to hear a theme that I also disagree with, the building discussion, we have not begun yet, really. We've just done the very toe dip in the water. And so from where I sit, without us having really gotten into the true work of that yet, I think that is too optimistic in my mind. I do appreciate you didn't put the whole thing there, but I couldn't in good faith make a budget that was counting on having that cost out of the assembly's hands. I think that's overly optimistic. And we may find through the building process that we don't want to. The debt service reduction is more where I will focus that there will probably be several proposals people make tonight. And philosophically, we talked about this at the retreat. For me, I think that to reduce it, if we want to reduce the mill rate, I think it's a better place to do that is to put it in the main body of the mill rate, because when the city needs to bond, we will be basically hamstringing future assemblies. So we fix something for us now, but when things that we can look forward to, like the state no longer taking care of the school buildings, like North Douglas Crossing, hopefully if we can get a slice of the infrastructure funds, and some of the other things that we've worked on, or some of the other things we can anticipate. So those are the 2 points. And I just find it to be too low of a mill rate for my comfort, so.
Mr. Kelly, then we'll hug you duck.
Thank you. If there's one thing I think we can all go into this discussion starting, it's that we all appreciate Ms. Hale's work on this. I can tell from some of the items that she's listed in here that she has been working on this so it corresponds to some of the questions I've heard her ask earlier, so I know she's been working on it for a while. I am feeling flexible on the amount of the debt service reduction at this point, but I think, like what I've heard from a few other assembly members, I am hesitant to take some of the school operation budget out of the fund balance. Thank you.
Wathlagidak.
Yeah, thank you. I would agree with a lot of the reflections from Ms. Ganges and Madam Mayor. I know a lot of work went into this memo. I can tell just by looking at it, and so I just want to say thank you to Ms. Hale for this. But I also feel similarly to the statements that were made. I appreciate that we want to reduce. I just also feel a little hesitancy, a lot of hesitancy for reducing to this amount when it comes to our bond capabilities in the future. And as Mrs. Ganji said, tying the hands of future assemblies.
Thank you. I believe I'm the only one who hasn't spoken yet. And I think a lot of the last few speakers spoke to where I'm at right now about kind of discomfort around assuming we're going to come out even on the schools, though I appreciate that intent and I think we would like to get there and I'd love to reduce our area-wide mill rate when we do. And, so open to flexibility around the debt service, but this mill rate's low for me. Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Manager. I won't try to respond to all of the points raised. I really appreciate the civility of this discussion. Thank you all. And I'm also very eager, I hope we can hear other people's proposals and so we can kind of make a mishmash of those. But if people have their budget books with them, call people's attentions to page DOC-13. And this is relative to the kind of the discussion of hamstringing future assemblies. So DOC-13 is this chart. It's the colorful chart showing what the mill rate has been. And at some point in the past, let's see, around about 2013, 2014, decisions were made, I think in part advised by the finance director, but decisions were made to keep the mill rate the same. And I've heard that argument that keeping the mill rate the same is better for the people who pay taxes, so their mill rate's not bouncing around. But the thing about the mill rate is it's multiplied by the assessed value. So you can keep the mill rate the same all you want, and then the assessed value changes, and that changes the amount of taxes that are due. So I think that the argument that I'm arguing against this process or this tradition, and I don't think it's a normal tradition within city government to keep that debt service mill rate the same and pay off debt early. Because you can see prior to about 2013, the mill rate was all over the place. It went up, it went down, and I think that's more common. And so that's what I'm arguing for. Thank you.
I saw Mayor Weldon next.
So my question for you, Madam Chair, is how do we want to do this from here on? Would you like me to throw my idea out there? Do you want me to object to all the pieces that I don't like about hers to put my ideas?
No, I would like, I think what I heard from people is, not 5 votes for this, this particular proposal, but some general sense of where people are. And so I'd like to go to another proposal and we'll kind of do this iteratively until we get closer. I do want to be respectful if there are people who have questions or want to respond, because I saw Mr. Smith's hand. So I don't want all of us to pick apart all of the philosophy here, but people might have questions. And so Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I did just have a question. I'm looking at page of the budget book DOC 16, and that is the graph is titled Status Quo Forecast of Debt Service Mill Rate, showing that as soon as FY26 or in FY26, the debt service mill rate dropping to 0.58. I guess I was, and I may not be looking at the right graph for this. I have 2 questions on this graph, probably something I should know before, but I'll follow the dumb question sword. My first question is, does this graph in the forecasted mill rate shown here, debt service mill rate, is that being projected in that if the mill rate for FY25 stayed at 1.2, that would is it driving that is the savings we're getting if we were to keep the debt service mill rate at 1.2 in the FY25 budget? Is that driving down those numbers because we were paying debt off earlier?
Ms. Fleck.
So if I understand your question correctly, Mr. Smith, your question is, as we look out on the right tail of this graph, it shows the mill rate dropping from 1.2 to 0.58 in FY26, and then down to 0.36 by the time you get to 31. The debt that we would pay off early in FY25 is at the very end of this tail, and perhaps even off the graph. I don't have in the top of my mind the years, but it is on the tail end. And so, yes, that reduction would be reflected in this graph, but it is out in the out years where you would see that reduction in the mill rate.
Okay, very, very helpful. Madam Chair, may I have another question related?
I saw Ms. Atkinson's hand first, and then you can ask. Huggaduck, do you have your hand up, or was that from last time?
From last time, sorry about that.
No worries. Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you, Chair Wall. This is just a clarifying question for Ms. Flick. This page DOC 16 has an FY26 0.58 predicted mill rate, but then I see that the required debt service for, is it just coming down from 7.76 to 0.58 in 2020 in FY26? I'm seeing a 0.76 here.
So, good question. Thank you, Ms. Atkins. The FY25 number on this graph shows a 1.2 debt service mill rate. Given the discussion we had at the retreat was to keep the debt service rate level. So that FY25 1.2 could drop to 0.76 and cover the required debt service payment. And then in FY26, that required debt service payment would drop the mill rate to 0.58 if we were just keeping exactly with what's due and not issuing any new debt.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Chair Wall. Appreciate the leniency here to do these questions. My question is, it's not so much on the debt service mill rate in future years, it's bonding capacity of the city. I mean, the mayor brought up a good point on some potential large, projects that would probably require bonding potentially. I remember as we were discussing the city hall question and in recent years on debts, on bonding capacity, my sense was that we had a lot, and that, city hall was obviously going to be a large piece. Since that did not go forward, we still have a lot of debt capacity. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Smith. We are looking for, in a recent AFC meeting, we did some great graphics for you on potential mill rate. That would be for the meeting somewhere around probably May 1st. And yes, we do have capacity for a bit of debt, and really it will come down to how we want to structure that debt and the way that how the assembly wants to have those questions posed to the voters. So if the debt service mill rate is dropped to the required debt service payment today, and we go to the voters for new debt in October, then that will require likely some adjustment to the debt service mill rate, or stretch out the debt for so long that it lives within the capacity of what's retired in the next couple of years. Does that make sense?
I think so. You may have actually answered my follow-up, but just so I'm clear on it, I'm gonna actually ask it. I think this is probably obvious that by having a higher debt service mill rate, like in FY25, paying off that debt early, that obviously that increases our bonding capacity. So that's a correct logic, right?
Yes, Mr. Smith, I think that's logic is just fine.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I'm gonna hand it over to Mayor Weldon to talk us through her proposal, maybe slowly for us, as we don't have it written down.
Yes, I apologize, just easing back into this, so I haven't a beautiful proposal like Madam Hale. There's your laugh, Ms. Director. So my proposal would bring the mill rate down to 10.04. And to accomplish this, this is where, hang with me. I propose funding the 1,023,100 included in the manager's proposed budget for facilities, operation, and maintenance for Marie Drake, Floyd Dryden, and the JSD district offices one time. And this is where I switch with Madam Hale. De-appropriate the same amount from the new city hall CIP for a net amount, for a net impact on the general fund of $0. So to say that in other words, the money that is supposed to go to cover these 3 new buildings we have, instead of taking it from general fund, I would take it from the new city hall CIP, which folks remember is 16 million, so that would drop it down to 15 million. So by doing this, it reduces the manager's proposed mill rate of 0.16 mils right there. So you're back down to our original mill rate of 10.16. So and to move that further down, I would reduce the debt service mill rate by 0.12, and that brings us down to 10.04. So if anybody has any questions, they could ask me. So basically, your debt service mill rate would be 1.08, and the change of the whole mill rate, you would change it on the area-wide mill rate to 6.2. So that's the difference, is no reduction in general fund. We're taking it from a CIP, and I wouldn't go quite as far as Ms. Hale on the mill rate, but I would take the minus 0.12.
All right, now committee comments on that proposal. Well, first, let me ask if there's any questions for the maker of the proposal. Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Madam Mayor, for that, that proposal. It's good. The $1.023 million that you would deappropriate from the new city hall, I'm afraid I didn't have that number quite right. I know there is concern among assembly members that, and I've certainly heard it expressed in the past, that if we do something this year and those costs are going to be recurring costs, are we setting up future assemblies for not having the capacity for those recurring costs?
The reason I'm doing one time is because we're very hopeful to get people into those buildings to pay for those buildings, and that's why I was doing it as a one time this time.
Good question. Other comments on this proposal? Ms. Hughes-Gandies.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I didn't see anyone else rushing in, so I'll just weigh in, I guess. It's more than, it's moving more of that school funds. You know, I told Ms. Hale that I thought that was overly optimistic to take half, and we hadn't started the process. So I still have that critique that, you know, we haven't even started the process yet. So to say that you're going to make it completely cost neutral, I think is optimistic. That being said, the mechanism of using the CIP instead of fund balance, I do find that more palatable to myself. I think that's kind of a slick move. And do I think we need a city hall? Sure. But obviously I was wrong. The voters, with, as far as I've heard critique, the amount that is tied up in that CIP. And so in terms of buying yourself a year out of that CIP, I sort of see as a maybe I could, I'm chewing on it. I think I find that more so. Where I still disagree, however, is on that debt service mill rate reduction. And it's going to be for the same reason. And that was a great discussion we just had about what our bonding capacity is and how it works and how it's driven. But for me, I'm going to say, if you want to reduce the mill rate, and I understand different philosophies of how we deal with that, but I think for a community that uses debt for large projects, to me, it does make sense to keep that where it is. And I don't need to revisit that, but maybe it's warmer, which is crazier because it's a larger number to take out of it, but I like the funding source more. So that's where I am thinking.
Thank you, Ms. Uscandies. You must have other comments. Ms. Atkinson?
Thank you, Chair Wall. I'm still kind of chewing on this, but I think I am similar to Ms. Hughes-Scandies on the use of CIP. I still am a little uncomfortable with, I think there's a good possibility, try as we might, that we are going to end up with operational costs for the two school buildings in future years. And so, I don't know how I feel about offsetting 1 year and then having to reevaluate that later. That being said, I also do not mind the CIPs as much as I mind general fund. I also feel like I'm more in Ms. Hale's camp in terms of debt service. I think she had a really good medium ground where we did not lower the debt service mill rate to only the required, but we did lower it more significantly than this proposal. So I can maybe come the way of spending out of the City Hall CIP, but I would rather see the debt service go down a little more.
Mr. Kelly?
Thank you. I applaud both Madam Hale and Madam Mayor for their creativity. I do have a little bit of hesitancy again about. I applaud the creativity for taking it out of the City Hall CIP, but then I also think that perhaps that City Hall CIP could be used to offset other potentially unforeseen expenses, especially since we don't have a negotiated deal. We don't know where city offices are going to be at this point, and we could be accruing additional expenses from that. And so I am not altogether against using that CIP, but for that reason, I'm a little hesitant at this point.
I saw Mr. Smith, Ms. Hale, Mr. Bryson, and the Wahagi Duck. I think that was the order. I hope. Mr.
Thank you.
Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually didn't have any comments on this. I had another proposal, but there are questions on this one that I would need to go or seem to go first. So I'll lower my hand for now.
Let's keep the discussion on this proposal for the moment, but good to know. We've got a few other proposals coming out of the woodwork here. Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Even though, one could make the argument that we're not addressing next year, I do agree with Madam Mayor that to the extent possible that we make these cost neutral, make these buildings cost neutral. I also think that we are fond of splitting hairs up here, and we sometimes noodle these things to death, and in the end, it doesn't matter that much. And we get to the next budget cycle, and all that work that we put in really didn't matter. So I guess I'll just remind you, remind myself of that. So I will support the mayor's proposal. I might make an amendment at some point, but I'll certainly support it. I also, if I could, just want to respond to one comment that was made, and it's very true, that when the bond proposition is on the ballot, it states what the increase in the property taxes would be. And I guess you know, that's probably what we're legally required to do, even if we don't have to increase property taxes. And I would call that a communication problem. So if we need to communicate elsewhere in other ways that it would not increase property taxes, that's something we need to figure out. Thanks.
Wahoidak.
Yeah, I'm supportive of this route. I feel like it hits my marks a little closer to what I find palatable. We're still lowering the mill rate. It still does make a lot of presumptions moving forward, but I love the creativity here and being able to remain flexible as we move forward. So I'm supportive of this proposal.
Thank you. So I have 3 people have indicated to me they have new proposals, Mr. Smith, Mr. Bryson, and Ms. Hughes Candies. I'm gonna, before I get to those, I'm gonna make sure I speak on this proposal, and then I'd say you all will get a chance to speak your proposal in the order that I saw you raise your hand. Okay, myself, I definitely think Mayor Walden's proposal is warmer for me in the reasons that some of you all spoke to. Personally, and here's where philosophies in my brain collide. We've all given many arguments for different sides of these things, but I would prefer either we reduce the debt service in the way that the mayor proposed, or take the funding from the CIP to make it up. So that's where I am at right now. I had Mr. Smith first, Mr. Bryson, and then Ms. Hughes Candies for throwing in some alternative proposals here. We won't vote on anyone's proposal until we've heard all the proposals on the floor. So, Mr. Smith, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate this. I mean, these are, anyway, creative ideas. My proposal would be to let the debt service mill rate fall to what it is needed to pay our debt, reduce it by 0.44, and not adjust the area-wide mill rate. I guess the reason I'm trying to go that way is I think to me it's clearer, and the principles that I think we hear from staff, that I think we probably know deep down are probably right. If we are going to have recurring spending, we should pay for it with a recurring funding source like the mill rate. I guess overall, I appreciate what people are trying to do by eliminating those costs of the schools that are now in our possession, or will be, or whatever. But there is a cost, and we don't know how much, if any, it goes down in the next year. I think it is just more straightforward, more clear, more understandable by the public that the school district consolidated. They relieved themselves of these buildings. We are now taking them over. We are now needing to pay for that, and as a result, there was I believe a logical and reasonable proposal by the manager to increase the debt service, or excuse me, to increase the mill rate to pay for them. But so as a result, I think we should, in my opinion, I would like to reduce the mill rate for the reasons we've talked about already. I think it sounds like there's a lot of agreement in that in the body. But I believe it is just more clear and again fits with my principles of how we budget and how we tax, to reduce the debt service mill rate to what it's needed to pay our debt, and not adjust the area-wide mill rate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. What I'll do for this one, I mean, happy to take discussion on this proposal if you want, but maybe I'll ask, we had 2 proposals so far. one got us warmer, I would say. So maybe my question for the body, does Mr. Smith's proposal get us closer to what we're looking for than Mayor Weldon's? And raise your hand if it does. Mr. Kelly.
I'm just answering in the affirmative.
Mr. Kelly, sorry, you think it does get Mr. Smith's proposal is closer to what you'd like to see?
Closer, I might have some differences on the number, but I do appreciate the simple approach.
Thank you. Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just kind of running a tally as we were making our different proposals. I would beg to differ that it got us warmer. I think that some people were quite warm to my proposal and others were quite warm to Madam Mayor's. And I think there's some that are warm to Mr. Smith. So I'm not sure how we're going to work this out, but yes.
Thank you for that. Okay, so maybe let's talk about Mr. Smith's proposal and how it compares to other proposals. Mayor Weldon.
Actually, this is not a question for Mr. Smith, although that brings the mill rate down to 9.88. This is a question for staff. If we drop the mill rate down that far, how does it affect our potential bond packages that we were talking about for, sorry.
The public safety
There we go.
infrastructure and
Yeah,
the wastewater.
Yes, exactly, because it doesn't look like it leaves any room there.
Thank you for that question, Madam Mayor. If we drop the debt service mill rate to 0.76, a question that I would have for the body is, do you want us to try to figure out how to live within 0.76? The graph that Mr. Smith had you look at on Doc 13, in FY '26, the debt service mill rate for the debt that we currently have on the books would drop to 0.58. In 2030, it would drop to 0.42. So we could see if we could structure the debt that's coming forward within where we ended up for at 0.76. We would just have to work with our financial advisors to see if they think that's practical, how long that stretches the debt. Or the other option is to, if that is too long to pay the debt back, it would be going to the voters with the debt service mill rate would have to increase to blah, blah, blah to accommodate.
When you're talking about the length, are you talking 30 years, 50 years? Guess?
It's always a guess. When you're talking about public safety infrastructure and these wastewater projects, I would expect a bond length to be in the 20 to 25 years. And we would, it's typically a place to start with that kind of asset that's being built with bond funds.
Madam Manager.
Thank you. I just would like to draw the body's attention, because it took me a while to find this, to page 74 of the May 1st packet. And in that packet, we do game out a number of scenarios. So as you think about, like, what is our future debt capacity that might be helpful, it does make some assumptions, like Director Flick mentioned.
Page 74, Ms. Wendell just pulled it up on the screen if you want to look at it there.
Other comments on Mr. Smith's proposal? Mr. Bryson.
Thank you. Well, I saw where Mr. Smith was going with this, to the minimum debt payment. I think it pulls too far away from where this group was. I was hoping next I had a way to split the difference between Mrs. Hale's and Mayor Weldon's proposal. I think Mr. Smith's was too far out of the realm that I'd be comfortable with. That's my comment. Thank you.
Mr. Kelly?
Thank you. I don't know if, I feel like there's already so many proposals up here, so I feel hesitant to mention anything else. I guess I would just say that I think I also agree with most of the body that, or I guess most of the body who's spoken so far, that I believe dropping down to 0.76 would be too far. I might be more comfortable with dropping down to something more like 1.08 for our debt service mill rate.
Okay. This is helpful. I think we're getting somewhere. I believe I had Mr. Bryson, then Miss Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I really like Ms. Hales. I really like the mayors. They were only 0.06 mils off, so they were very close. So I was going to split some hairs here. If we did the debt service reduction of 0.18, so that's the, and not Ms. Hales recommended 0.25, but a negative 0.18, and then use the mayor's CIP recommendation to fund the schools out of the one-time City Hall CIP. That ends us up with a proposed mill rate of 9.98. So I acknowledge Madam Mayor's appreciation for protecting the mill rate service. I thought that's fair. But Madam Mayor's suggestion of using City Hall CIP funds to satisfy that, while we're pulling back the lever a little bit on our debt service rate, but it gets us to the 9.98 mill rate. Thank you for the time.
Mr. Bryson would have to do his math again, because that's what I proposed was the 1.08. So I'm not sure where you're getting that math.
Can you clarify the drop of 1.18? What exactly you're talking about?
So my recommendation, Mayor Weldon, I believe you had a negative 1.2 mill rate. Ms. Hale had a negative 0.25 mill rate. I was going to make a recommendation of a 0.18 negative 0.18 to that debt service reduction from 1025 to, or I don't want to speak anymore on that. Negative 0.18. Yes, that was the debt service reduction that I was proposing, which was kind of in the between Madam Mayor and Ms. Hales. Thank you.
I'm confused. Can I ask Ms. Flick and then Ms. Flick?
Mr. Bryson, I'm gonna restate what I think I heard you say, and you can tell me if I'm with you. So your suggestion is that the debt service mill rate be essentially kind of halfway between the 0.95 and the 1.08. And so we would, it's not, if you're looking on the chart, it's not on the chart. It's in between two lines there. And so we would be able to pay off one of our maturities early, but not the second one.
And I know we talked about this, but what would be the impact of that? I mean, I was under the impression that there was reasons behind using these intervals.
Great question, thank you. The reason for those intervals is because they allow us to pay off a complete debt early. We can't pay off a partial maturity, so we have to pay them off in bulk. So if we did, as Mr. Bryson suggests, we would essentially generate a little bit of fund balance in the debt service, and if we have a little bit more generated through another means or through another year similar to this, then we could, when we have enough saved, then go pay something off early. Whereas the breaking points that are expressed in the memo I wrote earlier, and again on Ms. Hale's sheet, allow for that clean break between things we could pay off in whole.
Great. Or do people understand Mr. Bryson's proposal? I think what would be helpful is to maybe do a round robin at this stage and, well, I should take that back. We still have one other proposal. So let's, comments or questions on Mr. Bryson's proposal, and then we'll hear the last proposal. Mayor Weldon, then Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. You're always trying to find a compromise, so I appreciate that. Just looking at the chart on page 74, you're dropping the debt service to 0.90, and you can see that it's going to create some problems pretty quickly. So I'm not in favor of that.
Thank you. I just had, sorry. Sorry.
Could we take an at ease so that maybe the Mayor Weldon and Mr. Bryson can make sure that they're on the same page and we can all make sure we're on the same page? Oh, can we? All right, we are back. Once we have heard from each of the proposal makers, just wanted to give clarity on kind of what I'm gonna do after that. Is I'm gonna do a round robin, which proposal are you closest to right now? And then whichever one has the most votes at the time, we'll start with that proposal and people can make amendments. It'll kind of depend on where people are at, but that's where I'm gonna how I'm gonna get people's temperature and figure out where we're going. Ms. Hale.
I could support 3 of them. So I'm like, vote, 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 you know?
Yes, so that'll be good information to have. I
Okay.
just want something on the table that we can start to work with, and I want it close to where the
Okay.
group is, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But before we get there, Mr. Bryson, did you have clarification on your proposal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The debt mill service rate is 1.2. The recommendation from Ms. Hale was reduce it by 0.25, bring it down to 0.95. The recommendation from Madam Mayor was to reduce it by 0.12, which would bring it down to 1.13. I was splitting the difference. My recommendation is to bring it down 0.18, leaving us with a debt mill service of 1.02. According to the chart, it still allows for debt service required plus 1 callable maturity. So we are still paying debt off a little bit. We're not paying the minimum. And it puts us, the odd from being split in between the two would then just go into fund debt service fund balance. That again, that money will just pay off debts as we move forward. It's a compromise between Madam Mayor and Ms. Hales, and it gets us the lower 9.98 mill rate. That's my clarification. Thank you for the time.
Mr. Kelly, then Ms. Hale.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I got clarification on Mr. Bryson. So I got understood the debt service part. Would you be able to restate the rest, where the rest of it would come from?
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. The money that would be required to cover the 1.1 that would be required to cover the new school operational funds, I was following the mayor's line, and we will use the City Hall CIP for that one-time use. By next year, we'll know what kind of revenue we'll be expecting from those schools, from the school operations, and we'll be able to make more informed decisions. This gets us to the 9.98.
Ms. Hale.
Just a comment about the graph on page 74 of the May 1st packet. I spoke with Finance Director Flick after the meeting, and I think it was after the meeting and not during the meeting, where we see the blue spiking up from the North Douglas crossing. That is one scenario. So this is like one possible scenario here. There's a lot of freedom in how debt is structured. So this does not necessarily, I mean, it doesn't mean that and it's also, you will note that the time that that comes online is like in 3 years. So we don't really think that's going to happen in 3 years. So just wanted to make that point that the debt can be structured in a lot of different ways.
Ms. Hughes Candies, I believe you have a proposal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do. I want to start by saying just the same way that I wanted to give Ms. Hale kudos for her excellent work that she put into that. Thank you so much. You are doing an amazing job of guiding us through this insane 5 proposal rodeo. So you have my thanks. I will keep this somewhat brief because I'll try to be to the point. I am not trying to get high taxes as my middle name. And I do think, based on what I'm sort of starting to get as the temperature of the room, that perhaps this will not warm the water up, so I don't want to waste too much time on it. But I would propose a mill rate of 10.32, which is the manager's proposed mill rate. And I just wanted to weigh in a little bit because I know that our mill rate remained flat for a time. And I know that our assessments, thanks to our state laws that require us to assess at the full and true value of the property, went up in this very, property limited place where we're not having a lot of new property built or new housing built. In that time, however, I just want to give voice to the fact that I hear from the citizens of the community, fund our schools, fund them as high as you can, fund them to the extent, go above and beyond, find new ways to fund them and make up the difference that the state is not doing. Please do more swimming lessons. There's not enough swimming lessons for the kids to get into. We need a park in this part of town. So I just want to, I don't think the manager has brought us a budget that, proposed expanding services. And I don't think she brought us a mill rate that was thoughtlessly trying to expand the mill. There's a lot of things that economic pressures that I would like to make better for our community. I'd love for more housing to be available, more childcare to be available. I will keep this to topic just to say that I think Ms. Hale is exactly right. When you actually do the math and you are talking about sort of this outcry for property tax relief, I do not hear that. I know that times are tough right now. I think, again, it is just, I want to say, incumbent on us to consider the finances of this city and what the impact to lowering the mill rate will be, and weigh that against what the financial impact to the individual taxpayer will be. So I just want to share one example. The proposal so far on the table that has me the warmest is a modification of the mayor's, which would be to not cut the debt service mill rate, to use the City Hall CIP to pay for 1 year of funding for a mill rate of 10.16. And so I asked Ms. Flick earlier today, the difference in tax bill, just to make sure I was doing the math right, between 10.32, the manager's proposal, which I'm proposing, and 10.16. And the difference is $80 to somebody who owns a home that's worth $500,000. So I just want us to keep that perspective. And when I think about the many moving pieces of the city,
Ms. Sandys, can you clarify if that's a monthly or an annual?
that's an
amount?
annual, that's an annual. So you divide that over 12 months, it's less than that. So the annual tax difference for a $500,000 home, if you reduce the mill rate from 10.32 to 10.16 is $80. So I just wanted to have that number in our head. And I would be most comfortable with the manager's proposed mill rate. But I just wanted to give that perspective voice because I think this evening, it seems like we all came in, it almost, I wouldn't want the public perception to be, we all know what we gotta do is get to whatever the lowest mill rate is. And I understand the desire to make things better for our citizens, but we have to consider a lot of moving pieces.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes-Candies. Any comments or reactions to Ms. Hughes-Candies? Mr. Bryson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's why, thank you, Ms. Hughes-Candies. I was listening intently, but it's why I like Ms. Hales and Madam Mayor's budget proposal, because we are reducing the debt service mill rate. So we are having zero impact on city services. So we don't have to sacrifice a single swimming lesson because we're just figuring out our finances to get us to the mill rate. We're not asking the manager to reduce a single city service to get to this mill rate. We're just moving the money around right now is how we're having this discussion. How much money do we pay off? And our debt service mill rate does not impact. Maybe I should ask that question to Madam Manager. Does the debt service mill rate have any impact on city operations or any city services that we provide?
You are correct that a reduction in the debt service mill rate does not impact the operating budget. Certainly, the quality of our infrastructure does impact our operations, but and that's what we use the debt service mill rate to fund.
I continue. And that's why I didn't go with Mr. Smith's extreme reduction of the debt service mill rate. The other thing that I'd like to mention is that we do fund schools to the absolute cap, and we go above and beyond. So we're never going to be able to make up for what the state's not doing, but we fund to the cap every single time that I've been on this assembly. And so the schools are receiving as much funding as we can give them. No city services being cut, but because we control our debt service mill rate, we can offer the citizens a lower mill rate, which impacts the cost of living. It really does. And right now we do hear of families that are leaving the community because of the cost of living in here. And now we don't have to cut a single city service, but we can also reduce the mill rate. That's why we're on the right track, and that's why we're also warm. Thank you for the time.
Mr. Kelly?
Thank you. Just a question on the process when we do our round robin. If we're not quite all the way there to one of the proposals, but we're close, is that the one we should indicate?
Yeah, so my intent now is to go around, get a sense of which ones you're closest to, because what I'd like to do is put one of those on the table so that if maybe everyone's cool with that one and we're just going to say yes to it, or maybe there's additional little tweaks that need to be made to it. And so that just to help us move forward. So I think let's just go around, say where you're at. Please avoid maybe your philosophy in this moment and just say which one. We can keep talking about philosophy, but if there's one that you want to put on the table, say that. If you're halfway between two, say that, and we'll figure out where we go from there. And I will, because I haven't gotten a chance to speak on Ms. Hughes-Candy's proposal before we do that, I'll just just reiterate many of the points that she's making, that there are long-term trade-offs for reducing our mill rate. The manager just spoke to the challenges of reducing the debt service, that it's going to make it harder for us to get projects approved in the future. I think the other thing that hasn't been said is we have negotiations coming up this year, and so we do not know right now what the increase in our operating expenses are going to be moving forward for paying for our staff, and we'll continue to have staffing challenges if we don't keep up with that. And so just a reason that I think we all know that when we drop the mill rate too far, it makes it that much harder to increase it in the future. And so I'm going to be closer to thinking about somewhere between Madam Mayor and Ms. Hughes-Candy's proposals. But all right, let us go round robin here and just get a pulse check on where people are at. This is not a vote, it's a pulse check to put a proposal on the table. I will start at that end of the room and end on our screen. So Mayor Weldon, what proposal would you like on the table?
I like my proposal the best, not gonna lie. I could maybe cringe a little bit and take Mr. Bryson's.
Ms. Hale.
I like Mr. Bryson's best, seconded by Madam Mayor's.
I would prefer a modified Greg.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I missed it.
Modified Assemblymember Smith.
I was gonna say I was closest to Ms. Hales, but she doesn't even like her own anymore, so. But I can definitely come the way of the mayor's proposal as well.
I am closest to the mayor or Ms. Hughes-Candies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really liked both the mayor and Ms. Hales, and that's why I came up with mine. I thought was split down the middle, so I'm gonna have to selfishly vote for my own. Apologize.
Walhagidak.
Yeah, I'm also between Miss Hughes Ganges and the mayor's.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you. I'm still for mine. I won't talk about why it's that. I'm just kidding. I won't do that part. But I could move towards something like Miss Hales.
Ms. Hughes-Candies.
I think, well, my own, and then I think a modified mayor's would be the two where I'm at.
Well, that is decidedly not obvious. I mean, I think, we're probably somewhere in the realm of, let me have an at ease and I'll think about this, but we may have to just put one on the table and see where it goes. Yes, 5 minutes. All right, we're back. We tallied who got the most votes and are just gonna start with that proposal. So the mayor had the most votes. So we're gonna, Madam Mayor, we're gonna ask you to officially put your proposal on the table, and everyone is welcome to make amendments as they see fit. So if you would like to change any pieces of the mayor's proposal, knowing what you know about everyone else, so maybe, be realistic. Yeah, try counting to 5 as you try to get there, but we'll see how this goes. Mayor Weldon.
Thank you. I'll make this short since we've talked about it so much. So I move a mill rate of 10.04. Again, to accomplish this, I'm taking the 1 million plus change money out of the manager's proposed budget and de-appropriating the same amount from the new city hall CIP, not affecting the general fund, and then I'm reducing the debt service mill rate by 0.12 mils. So the debt service would then be 1.08. And I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objections? I see Miss Hughes Scandies. Would you like to speak to your objection or object for an amendment?
I would like to ask you, and then I can make an amendment. I would like to ask whether whether it would be start getting too messy if I asked. I appreciate the motion, how she'll accomplish that mill rate. If I wanted to divide the question between the reducing the debt service mill rate and the removal of the one-time money, or, taking that money out and making it one time. Does that make sense? You can ask her to repeat the numbers and then it would just be an amendment and I can speak to the amendment. Maybe that's cleaner. Mayor Weldon, would you please speak to the amount of reduction you said for the debt service mill rate? You're reducing it from 1.2 to 1.13, is that correct?
So I'm not quite sure what you're asking me, Ms. Hughes Candy, so I'll do the numbers again.
Okay.
So maybe this will help you. Currently, currently the mill rate the proposed is 10.32.
Yes.
By taking the money out of the CIP, that takes away the additional 0.16 that the manager had to put in to cover that. And then I'm reducing it further by 0.12, so a total of 0.28, which gets me to the 10.04.
So yes, and I understand that's how, but I'm asking specifically the number to I was just trying to get the number of if I look at the component pieces of the mill rate, your debt service, you are proposing to change that from 1.2 to 1.08. 1.08, okay.
And then the area wide would go back to 6.20.
Right, okay. Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, may I make an amendment then?
Go ahead.
I would amend Madam Mayor's motion to change the debt service rate to 1.2.
Objections to the amendment. I see Miss Hale first.
We've talked a lot tonight, so can I just speak briefly to it?
Oh, yes, you can.
Okay, so I think reducing the mill rate from the two pieces of this maneuver, so removing that money makes it already come down to 10.16. I do just want to remind everyone, when we spoke at the retreat, we spoke at length then as well, and there have been comments tonight that, by reducing the debt service, you're not reducing any city services. And I didn't mean to imply that we were. I just want to be really clear. Yes, we still have debt capacity. Yes, any assembly can do whatever they want. But by taking our reductions like this, it makes us say, that's great, we solved our problem. We heard somebody say they wanted lower taxes and we were able to do it because this is where we took it from. But what about tomorrow? And I feel like this assembly has benefited so much from decisions that were made from assemblies of yesteryear. So for that reason, I still think this would leave you with a reasonable reduction to the mill rate. So I would urge a yes vote.
Ms. Hale, Ms. Atkinson, Mr. Smith, you all are welcome to speak to your objections if you would like.
I'll speak fairly briefly. I do not agree with not reducing the mill rate, and while I do like my proposal, I think the mayor has come up with a good, solid proposal, and I support it completely. And I will say, in response to some earlier comments, a couple of things. I know somebody had said that reducing the mill rate makes it harder to move forward in the future on projects, for example. I would say that not reducing the mill rate at this time when we can, and when other assemblies have done that previously, before we started with this stable mill rate, that makes it harder to move forward on projects because people see that we are just inflexible and we will not reduce the mill rate. And the other thing that I'd like to say about the $80 for a $500,000 home or whatever, or $50, I've heard this, this is my 6th year on the assembly, I've heard this argument every single year. And to make the argument that we shouldn't reduce the mill rate because it's only this much means that it just keeps sitting there or it keeps creeping up. And that's all very additive. Thank you.
Ms. Atkinson, Mr. Smith, Mayor Weldon.
Thank you. I will also be very brief. I do want the debt service mill rate to go down at some amount. I can't count to 5 on getting to a 0.25 decrease, but I would rather see the mayor's decrease of 0.12, and so I will be objecting to this.
Mr. Smith.
No comment, thanks.
Mayor Weldon.
I appreciate where Ms. Hughes Candies is coming from. I was one of the ones at the retreat to say to hold the line at 1.2, but the fact of the matter is we've been asked to reduce this, and so I'm just trying to be creative. It takes a little bit from a CIP, take a little bit of debt service. So, but I'm just looking at a little bit. So I hear you, Ms. Hughes Candies, and I don't know that I can get any lower than 1.08.
All right. We have a motion and we have an amendment. Sorry, we have an amendment and we have an objection. Ms. Wendell, will you call roll?
Thank you, Chair Wall. Is it helpful if I repeat the original motion, or is everybody clear on that?
I think we're good. Just the amendment, please.
On the amendment to change the debt service mill rate in the mayor's original motion to 1.2 mils. Assemblymember Hughes Candies.
Ms. Wendell, could you repeat what you just said? Because I feel like I'm very clear on what is on my amendment, but I sounded like you didn't say my amendment.
On the amendment to change the debt service mill rate to 1.2 mils.
Okay, yes.
0.08 mils in the mayor's original motion.
Yep, yes. Sorry, it came through funny. That's a yes.
Assemblymember Hale.
No.
Assemblymember Atkinson.
No.
Mayor Weldon. No. Assemblymember Smith.
No.
Assemblymember Kelly.
No.
Assemblymember Bryson. Assemblymember Wachlaw Gadak.
No.
Chair Wall.
Yes.
Amendment fails, 2 ayes, 7 nays.
All right, we have Mayor Weldon's motion on the floor. I see Mr. Kelly with his hand raised. And I'm sorry if I forgot other people that had their hands raised from earlier before that. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I move to amend the mayor's proposal by basically the other half, by removing taking the 1 million and change out of the City Hall CIP and ask for unanimous consent.
Clarify, I think you mean not taking it out?
Correct. That's the part I would like to remove. Thank you.
Ms. Atkinson, then Mr. Bryson.
Just a question for the maker of the motion. Would you then, if it's not coming out of a CIP, do you want that to, what's happening instead of that?
Okay, what would be happening instead of that is we would just be reducing the overall mill rate by 0.12.
Thank you for that clarity. Are people clear on Mr. Kelly's motion? Mr. Bryson?
Yeah, I'm going to object to that. I don't think that we would actually be left with a higher mill rate than what we had last year. So we would be raising the mill rate if we went ahead with that proposal. The mayor's come up with a really appropriate way to reduce that 1 million and change. I think that we have a more of a consensus in the mayor's original motion. And I don't think that if we remove that, it just doesn't do enough movement to the mill rate. I don't think the citizens would be happy with our outcome if that was the only thing that we did. So I'm going to maintain an objection against that amendment. Thank you.
Mr. Smith, then Ms. Hale and Mayor Weldon.
Thank you, Chair Wall. Very quick. I appreciate what Mr. Kelly is trying to do. I still would argue that there are cleaner ways to reduce the mill rate. But I'm going to oppose it just because of the fact that it isn't decreasing the mill rate to the amount that I would like to see. But I appreciate the thought and the principle behind it. Thanks.
Ms. Hale, then Mayor Weldon.
I object, and I don't need to speak to it.
I object, no comment.
I'll support Mr. Kelly's motion here. I don't like where this is headed in terms of the reduction, but so I'll support it for that reason. We have a amendment and we have an objection. Ms. Wendell, will you call roll?
Thank you, Chair Wall. On the amendment to the mayor's proposal to not deappropriate 1.23 million from the new City Hall CIP, therefore only reducing the mill rate by 0.12 mils. Assemblymember Kelly.
Yes.
Assemblymember Bryson.
No.
Assemblymember Atkinson.
No.
Assemblymember Hale.
No.
Mayor Weldon. Assemblymember Hughes Candies.
Yes.
Assemblymember Smith.
No.
Assemblymember Wahlal Gadak.
No.
Chair Wall.
Yes.
Amendment fails, 3 ayes, 6 nays.
All right, that brings us back to the mayor's motion. I know I saw Mr. Smith's hand. Now I'm keeping track. So Mr. Smith, would you like to make an amendment if that is your intent?
Thank you, Chair Wall. It is. My amendment would be to reduce the mayor's debt service down by 0.25 instead of 0.12, the amount that Ms. Hale had in her amendment. In her proposal to reduce the debt service mill rate by 0.25. By reducing this mill rate, we're showing the community that we're responsive to their needs and the things that in trying to build trust so that they will hopefully vote for these projects in the future. We are paying our debt and then some. We're paying the debt required and then some by doing this. We don't need to cut services, but we can reduce the mill rate and still pay all our debts.
Objections to Mr. Smith's amendment. Mayor Weldon.
As I said before, I think that's just lowering the debt service too much for me.
Ms. Hughes Handies.
I object for the same reason. This is too low of a debt service, and I will abstain from speechifying, but I felt the urge with the phrase that this is how we're showing the community. So I'll just register my disagreement with that sort of philosophy.
So registered. Any other comments? All right, we have a amendment and we have an objection. Ms. Wendell, will you remind us what that amendment is?
Yes, on the amendment to reduce the debt service mill rate by 0.25 mils instead of 0.12 mils.
You may. Mayor Weldon, a question.
Thank you. So if I have done my math right, that brings the mill rate down to 9.91. Is that right? Since I messed up on Mr. Bryson's math, I want to make sure this math's right.
My math follows your math, Mayor.
All right, will you call roll?
Assemblymember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Weldon, Assemblymember Bryson,
Yes?
Assemblymember Wahal Gadak,
No.
Assemblymember Hale,
Yes.
Assemblymember Hughes Scandies,
No.
Assemblymember Kelly,
No.
Assemblymember Atkinson,
Yes.
Chair Wall.
No.
Amendment fails, 4 ayes, 5 nays.
Any other amendments? Mr. Bryson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could give my number a shot. My proposed amendment is going to follow the mayor's CIP City Hall request. I'm going to propose the debt service mill rate be, instead of the mayor's 0.12 reduction, the mill rate would be a 0.18 reduction, so the debt mill service rate would be 1.02 in my amendment. And I ask for unanimous consent.
Objections? Ms. Atkinson?
Thank you, Chair Wall. I really appreciate trying to come between the two proposals here. I am more comfortable going along with the cuts that was provided to us by the Finance Department, and seeing as we didn't get the will for a 0.25 reduction, I would be more comfortable with the Mayor's original motion, but I appreciate what you're doing.
Mayor Weldon?
I object for the same reason. I just am not comfortable going any further down on the debt service at this time.
All right. We have an amendment and we have an objection. Ms. Wendell?
Thank you, Chair Wall. On the amendment to reduce the debt service mill rate by 0.18 mils instead of 0.12 mils for a total debt service mill rate of 1.02 mils. Assemblymember Bryson,
Yes?
Assemblymember Atkinson,
No.
Mayor Weldon, Assemblymember Smith,
Yes.
Assemblymember Kelly,
No.
Assemblymember Hale,
Yes.
Assemblymember Hughes Scandies,
No.
Assemblymember Wahal Gadak,
No.
Chair Wall.
No.
Amendment fails, 3 ayes, 6 nays.
Any other amendments? All right, see no other amendments, any objections to the mayor's original motion? Oh, Mr. Smith?
Sorry, it was just really, it's good. I feel it's imperfect, but I'm okay with where it's gotten to. Thanks.
I'll object, I appreciate this process and everyone trying to get to something that's going to work for the majority of the group, but it's still not where I would put it, so I'll be a no. Ms. Hughes Candies, do you have, sorry.
I'll just
Okay.
also maintain my objection. for some
All right,
reason.
we have a motion and a objection. Will you call roll?
Would you like me to repeat the motion or, okay. On the motion to approve a mill rate of 10.04 mils, de-appropriating 1.023 million from the new City Hall CIP to fund the facilities maintenance of Marie Drake, Floyd Dryden, and JSC District Office as one time instead up through a mill rate increase, therefore reducing the mill rate by 0.16 mils and also reducing the debt service mill rate to 1.08. Mayor Weldon,
Yes.
Assemblymember Kelly,
Yes.
Assemblymember Wahal Gadak,
Yes.
Assemblymember Atkinson,
Yes.
Assemblymember Hughes Candies,
No.
Assemblymember Smith,
Yes.
Assemblymember Bryson,
Yes.
Assemblymember Hale,
Yes.
Chair Wall.
No.
Motion passes 7 ayes, 2 nays.
Nice work, everybody. We're close. And I do, so we're coming into the final FY25 proposed budget decisions. This is where we will move all the work that we have done out of this committee and to the assembly. We have tried to structure this process, taking chunks at a time, and I recognize that these decisions are iterative, and we may have may have made decisions tonight that have changed your opinions about the rest of the budget. So I want to make sure there's a moment to say, are there any other amendments to the work that we have done so far that anyone would like to propose? Ms. Hughes-Gandies.
Thank you, Chair Wall. I appreciate this moment, and I appreciate the work that everyone just went through. It was a little brutal, but really appreciate everyone's efforts. I'll just take this moment to propose an amendment to our previous work. It was hard to know where in the process it might be the right time to do it, so I think I will float it here and see what the body says. Now being done with our pending list and being set with our mill rate, I would propose that we take 2 million from our fund balance and appropriate it to the Affordable Housing Fund. And I will not speak overly long on that. I spoke at our very first meeting that I thought a larger number would serve us and serve the community well. I think we saw in a lot of the pending list items, that we have this shared concern about our future and the shared desire to work on our goals. And I don't need to speak to the reasons why I think it's a good thing, because I think you all are very familiar with them. So I will just see what people say to that.
Any objections to Ms. Hughes-Gandies' proposal? Mayor Weldon.
Thank you, and I appreciate Ms. Hughes-Gandies trying to help with housing, and I get it, but we've shown in the past that we will move funds as needed depending on the proposals, so I would like to see the proposals first before we make this move, because I know that we can take it back at any time, but it's hard to take it back when it's been allocated, so I would object.
Ms. Hale.
I'm not objecting. May I speak to this question? I 100% applaud Ms. Hughes-Gandies for this proposal. I think that what I've learned as I've studied affordable housing and just housing in general is that we have to hit it as hard as we can. And Ms. Glashevsky used to say, we've been working on this for X number of years, long before I was on the assembly, and we're not making any progress. And we have funded projects, we have loaned money for projects, and it's worse. It's worse today than it was 5 years ago because of other factors, short-term rentals, whatever those factors are. So I absolutely agree with bringing that fund balance down by another 2 million. I will also say that we kind of ballparked where we'd feel comfortable with the fund balance being, and I think we said around 6 to 9 million, and that brings it to 7.2 million. So I'm 100% in favor of it, and thank you, Ms. Candies. I hope I've made up for it now.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. Question for the manager. So with the with the formalized rules that we've come up with now, will this additional $2 million allow us to fund more projects?
It will give you more money to spend. That may be more money to projects, or that might be more projects. It would depend on the nature of the applications.
Mr. Bryson.
I had a question. I know that we've discussed, or the question has come up, to do 2 rounds of the Affordable Housing Fund. Have we made any progress, or are we still only doing 1 round of housing funding, affordable housing funding?
So there is currently only 1 round of the Affordable Housing Fund, and that will open, after the budget cycle, but in the near future. There is a big staff commitment in doing 2 rounds, and also the Assembly would need to fund that then in sections, right? Right now, we have about $2.6 million in the Affordable Housing Fund, so, you would have to, I guess, fund 2 rounds if you wanted to do 2 rounds and figure out how to do that.
Mr. Bryson.
Yes, I don't know that I want to do that now that you've kind of given me the background on it. So I absolutely am going to support 2 million. Thank you, Ms. Hughes Candies. This is, the more money we put into housing, the more housing we get built, the better off our community is going to be. So I will be supporting this $2 million ask. Thank you.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Chair Wall. My math or recollection on it is in FY25, we're putting in 1.6 million into the Affordable Housing Fund. I believe it will now, with that, it will have a balance of 2.6. I guess a question, one, just staff maybe confirm those numbers. My question though is, if we did not put this money in, how much would we be releasing? And then I guess the second part is, if we do put this money in, would we then be increasing that, award, that total award pot by 2 million?
Mr. Smith, I'll at least take part of the question, then I may tag team with Madam City Manager. Currently in our proposed budget, there is $500,000 of sales tax going into the Affordable Housing Fund, and also just over $1 million from the hotel bed tax going into the Affordable Housing Fund, which would give us a projected ending, or a projected fund balance of $2,368,000 that could be used for various things. You have several programs within that that would need to be funded, but could also go to the housing rounds.
Just to expand a little bit on Director Flick's response, within the Affordable Housing Fund is the manufactured home down payment assistance program that has budgeted for $30,000. You will be seeing some reauthorization language for that, and also the accessory dwelling unit program that has authority for $200,000. So all is that just a caution that if you appropriate the entire balance of that fund to Affordable Housing Fund grant and loan recipients, you wouldn't have that amount available for those programs. So it would likely be, somewhere below that $2.3 million without the amendment, of 4.3 with the amendment. But of course, that would be an Assembly decision when we get to, final approval. The committee would work on the assumption of the available funding without the appropriated amounts to those different programs. And so the Affordable Housing Fund Committee would make a recommendation to you based on the available funding without backing out those programs that have already been allocated. Does that make sense? I'm getting confused looks.
It is late. If I can provide a little bit of an assist. So within the budget authority from the Affordable Housing Fund, there is authority for, as the city manager said, $216,000 for the accessory dwelling units and $30,000 for the mobile home down payment assistance program. So taking those into account, along with funding that's coming in, there'd be $2.3 million in your fund balance. I would always encourage you to leave a little in your fund balance, but certainly, if you choose to adopt the proposal presented by Assemblymember Hugh Scandies, then you would have 4.3 million instead of 2.3 million available for your housing fund grants and loans.
Mr. Kelly?
Thank you, and I'll try not to muddy the waters any further. I guess the point of my original question was to kind of ask in, so are the current rules that we've formalized, are they flexible enough to allow us to fund more than one project? I know the Assembly can do whatever it wants, but with the rules that we formalized, would it be normal to fund 2 projects? Would that be permitted?
Yes, the committee would likely work down the list of eligible good projects until ran out of available funding, which would likely not be on the exact balance of the fund.
I'll speak in support of this motion. I want to give people a heads up that not to undermine this motion because I support it, but because I'm going to make another motion after this to put $1 million in the restricted budget reserve, and I want to just give people a heads up about that in case that affects their thinking about this. But it doesn't affect mine, but just wanted to let people know that. Any other comments? All right. Was there an objection from the mayor? Okay. We have a motion and an objection. Ms. Wendell, will you call roll?
Thank you, Chair Wall. On the motion to appropriate $2 million from unrestricted general fund balance to the Affordable Housing Fund. Assemblymember Hugh Scandies.
Yes.
Mayor Weldon.
No.
Assemblymember Kelly.
Yes.
Assemblymember Smith.
Yes.
Assemblymember Atkinson.
Yes.
Assemblymember Wahlal Gadak.
Yes.
Assemblymember Hale.
Yes.
Assemblymember Bryson.
Yes.
Chair Wall.
Yes.
Motion passes 8 ayes, 1 nay.
Any other amendments to the budget? I'm going to pass the gavel to Mr. Bryson.
Are there any additional amendments or motions? Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. I'd like to move that the Assembly add $1 million to restricted budget reserve from general funds. I'll quickly speak to my motion. I know we've been doing a lot. We have not really checked in on where our restricted budget reserve is at. And so I'd ask staff to quickly remind us what is our policy around our restricted budget reserve and where are we at? Because there's a big gap there. And I think we, as we continue to, our budget continues to grow, we should be either changing our policy or meeting our policy. So I'll ask staff to provide that information.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. At the end of FY '24, we at the end of FY '24, we are short in our restricted budget reserve by almost $10 million, 9.9 million. And that is because our policy focuses on the revenue that we have available, and it's based on not less than 2 months or 16.7% of the annual operating revenues. And so it looks back into the prior year audited and it looks at that number. So as we've had a lot of revenue coming into the city, that restricted budget reserve requirement per resolution has increased. And during the FY '24 budget process, one of the decisions that was made was to only add 3 million instead of 4 million, which would have gotten us to about where that restricted budget reserve should have been at the end of that time. We also know that part of that shortfall to where we should be is the $4.1 million loan that's been set aside for the school district. They've not yet requested their loans. We don't know precisely how much that's going to be. So our calculations at this point assumes the full $4.1 million as an outflow, and we know that whatever their loan is, the expectation is that would be replenished within 5 years. So I think that there's a little bit of give as far as that shortfall. When you consider the loan, we're only really looking at around 5 million.
Thank you, Ms. Flick. Are there any objections? Ms. Hale, would you like to speak to your objection?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I object to this. I think that, we had talked about having a fund balance of between 6 and 9 million. We're at 7.2 before we would put $1 million into the restricted budget reserve. I'll just remind us all that it's actually not required. This is a resolution, and we try to follow that resolution, and it's a really great idea. And we try to inflation-proof our restricted budget reserve. Mr. Bryson has always been very keen on that. However, I will say that we have a really large number of unusual expenses this year, and so I just don't think we need to for example, the expenses of the school district. And I just don't think we need to sort of punish ourselves by forcing another million into the restricted budget reserve right now. I think we need to pay attention to it and close attention, but this year doesn't feel like the right year.
Followed by Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I feel like this is a part of, I support Ms. Wall's motion. I feel like this is a part of keeping a responsible budget. I think when you have an emergency, it's appropriate to take that money from savings, but I think you should always be ready for the next emergency that could come around. And so I think it's sensible to put $1 million back into the restricted budget reserve.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. I understand the reason why. I mean, we have a policy, we have a resolution. I totally get that on principle and things. I guess for me, I'm kind of like, what's going to happen with that school district loan? And then I'm just concerned about the level of the fund balance that is available for opportunities or other issues that face the city. So I completely understand the rationale and logic behind the motion, but I think maybe I'm kind of with Ms. Hale on I'm okay letting it rest a year and seeing what happens with that loan. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Are there any additional questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll make my comment on this. We're taking unrestricted budget reserve, so we're just our savings account, and then we're putting it into tighter savings. It has little impact on the bottom line of the city. It's just making our money a little bit more protected. I don't think it puts at the level of risk of I hear where Ms. Hale's coming from, but the $1 million doesn't go anywhere. We're just protecting it a little bit more. And while it is a resolution, there's a reason why it's 2 months. When we got to the beginning of the pandemic, before the federal government declared how much money they would be releasing, we started to have those conversations. Thank God we have this money. We will be able to actually do stuff. So I'm going to support this. So thank you. Ms. Wendell, we have a motion. We have an objection. So if you call the roll.
Thank you, Acting Chair Bryson. On the motion to add $1 million to the restricted budget reserve from unrestricted general fund balance, Assemblymember Wall,
Yes.
Assemblymember Hale, Assemblymember Kelly,
Yes.
Assemblymember Wachlal Gadak,
Yes.
Assemblymember Atkinson,
Yes.
Mayor Weldon,
No.
Assemblymember Hughes Scandies,
No.
Assemblymember Smith,
No.
Acting Chair Bryson.
Yes.
Motion passes, 5 ayes, 4 nays.
Ms. Wall.
Okay, I think that brings us to the end here. Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move FY25 CIP Resolution 3052 as amended and in your packet with the updated May 8, 2024 on it to the full assembly for public hearing and adoption at the June 3rd, 2024 special assembly meeting.
And you asked for unanimous
And
consent.
ask for unanimous consent.
The mayor's been doing that to me so many times over the years. What a delight to do it back. Are there any objections? Seeing none, that's so moved. Madam Mayor.
I move FY25 mill levy ordinance 2024-03 as amended to the full assembly for public hearing and adoption at the June 3rd, 2024 special assembly meeting and ask for unanimous consent.
Any objections? Seeing none, that is so moved. Madam Mayor.
I move FY25 CBJ budget ordinance 2024-01 as amended to the full assembly for public hearing and adoption at the June 3rd, 2024 special assembly meeting. And ask for unanimous consent. Thank you, Madam Hale.
Any objections? Seeing none, that is so moved. That brings us to our next meeting date. We have a regular AFC
No
on,
more fund balance and wins.
oh, yes. Staff, would you give us an update on where we're at after all of those decisions, all that money we just spent?
So you are at 6,274,229 in your unrestricted general fund balance. And if I can just speak to, when we met last time, we briefly spoke about the sales tax revenue, and there are just some pictures in your supplemental handout to illustrate the things that we talked about at our last meeting. So the other thing that's in your original packet, page 15, is your ending, your marine passenger fee was the only other fund balance that changed. And that ending fund balance is now $1,267,800, as it includes the $3 million to the Capital Civic Center and the $90,000 to DBA from those funds.
Any questions? Thank you for that update. That brings us to next meeting date, June 5th. It's our next regular AFC. We will be talking about the audit. So read your audit. Mr. Smith?
Madam Chair, I just wanted to just take a quick moment and just say thank you for leading a very complicated process. And especially the community request process was new. I think you just, anyway, and I know, and I'm extending, of course, this to staff too, because I know that so much is with them, but thank you for just a good, clear, well thought out process. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mr. Smith, and thanks to everyone to holding to our agreements. I think we did pretty good. Mayor Weldon.
So I want to thank, unfortunately, I missed quite a bit of the finance or the budget stuff, and I just wanted to thank those members that channeled me during that process. I truly appreciate that. And my only comment would be, I really liked it turned out pretty good, the process on the pending list. My only comment would be, if you know you're not going to vote for it, I don't think you should be a sponsor.
Thank you, Mayor Weldon. Yeah, keep laughing. All right. I think that brings us to adjournment at 9:06. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Good job.